Mom is struggling to get by on her pension, and we, who are still able to work, should lend her a hand, shouldn't we? During the discussion about inheritance following their father's passing, Billy, the second son, earnestly addresses his brother and sister-in-law. However, it appears his words didn't quite strike a chord with them. How about we consider that just because she's relying on her pension doesn't mean we're obligated to hand over our hard-earned money? Suggests Billy. Exactly. Is our mother-in-law expecting us to foot her bills? Adds his wife. Suddenly, the eldest son and his wife shoot me looks as though they've tasted something sour, a gaze not befitting of one's parents. Stop trying to sponge off us, it's becoming a nuisance. The pensioner should fend for herself, except for special occasions like weddings and funerals. Stay out of our affairs, they retort. Hey, that's enough, Billy interjects, but I find myself looking down, clenching my fists. Not only are they seemingly impatient for my husband's demise, but they're also griping about inheritance and have labeled me a freeloader. Perhaps I've raised Billy wrong. I can't endure it any longer. Yet I address the eldest son and his wife calmly. I understand your perspective. Let's sever our ties. My name is Catherine, and I'm turning 65 this year. I live with my retired husband, who is kind and supportive. Together, we've raised 2 children. Dan, our eldest son, and Billy, our second. Recently, we've considered renovating our aging home, hoping to live with Dan and his wife, Rebecca, once the renovations are complete. When I broached the topic with Dan over the phone, his reluctance was palpable. Living together? Spare me. Rebecca won't like it either, he retorted. But if we're investing in renovations for our shared benefit, shouldn't it also accommodate their needs? However, from the other end of the line, I could almost hear Rebecca scoff. Living together? That's utterly impossible. I see. Let's just drop this conversation, I said, feeling the weight of the eldest son and his wife's usual superiority complex and cold demeanor. After I hung up, I relayed Dan and the other's sentiments to my husband, exactly as they were. He wore a somewhat lonely expression but spoke up cheerfully. Can't be helped. Let's focus on making the renovations for our comfort in old age. Following that decision, our home was remodeled to our liking, transformed into a barrier-free space. Several months later, scheduled for a meal with both our sons and their wives, Billy and Anne, our second son, arrived first. Anne, always considerate, handed me a hostess gift and immediately offered to help in the kitchen. Mother-in-law, you're always so good at cooking, she praised. Oh, thank you. I'm grateful for your help, Anne, I replied. As we chatted, the eldest son and his wife arrived, plopping heavily onto the sofa and demanding tea. Observing me preparing it, Rebecca and Dan grumbled impatiently. They have no consideration, Rebecca complained. Exactly, we're guests here. Hurry up, Dan added. Just as I was about to serve them, Billy approached Dan quietly from the side. Dan, can't you at least do that much by yourself? He whispered. Shut up, Dan snapped back. At Dan's harsh words, I sighed inwardly. Billy and Anne were kind, yet even they faced Dan's overbearing attitude. However, we had called both siblings together for an important discussion. As dinner commenced, Dan, eating grumpily, broke the silence. Hey Dad, since you called us here, you must have some business. Spit it out. My husband looked at me, and I nodded slightly. The truth is, it has been found that I have lung cancer. Billy and Anne showed genuine surprise, while the expressions of the eldest son and his wife remained unchanged. Dad, cancer. What's the current situation? Starting next week, I'll be hospitalized, I began, the weight of my words heavy in the air. They told me the cancer has spread all over my body, and I've got about 6 months left. That can't be. Well, dreadful news, Dan muttered, almost as if it were someone else's burden. Rebecca chimed in. You can't be age, right? My uncle quickly passed away from stomach cancer too. Thoughtless words pricked at me, and I couldn't help but raise my voice. Would you two just stop it? I interjected. It's fine, but... My husband's gentle voice calmed me down as he turned his attention to his children. I want you guys to look after your mother after I'm gone. Of course, Dad, we'll take care of Mom, so don't worry, the second son and his wife assured us firmly. Yes, please think about your own health, father-in-law, they added. However, the eldest son and his wife seemed disengaged, absorbed in their cell phones, not seeming to register their father's words at all. As the meal concluded, everyone began to depart. Since the eldest son and his wife left quickly, I stepped outside to see off the second son and his wife. Mom, I know it's tough, but hang in there. We'll also help, of course. Please let us know anything, Billy expressed sincerely. Thank you, Billy, I replied softly, touched by his kindness. With that heartfelt conversation, I bid farewell to the second son and his wife. My husband opted for palliative care over surgery and chemotherapy, so he was admitted to a hospice the following week. I began visiting the hospice almost daily, with my second son and his wife driving me and assisting in my husband's care. However, no matter how much I reached out, the eldest son and his wife never made an appearance. Then, about 5 months later, my husband's condition took a turn for the worse. I called the eldest son and his wife, informing them that this might be the end. Reluctantly, they appeared, but Dan neither held his father's hand, nor uttered a word to him. Instead, they merely stared at my frail husband as though he were a repulsive sight. We've shown our faces, isn't that enough? We have matters to attend to, so we'll be leaving now, the elder couple announced abruptly, exiting the hospital room not even 10 minutes after their arrival. As soon as they left, I noticed Rebecca grabbing her jacket. Hastily, I rushed after them. Approaching the staircase leading to the hallway, I saw them descending slowly, engrossed in their conversation and oblivious to my presence. It really seems like Dad's time is near. Hey, what's going to happen to the inheritance when father-in-law is gone? Dan smiled at Rebecca's question. Dad was just a regular employee, but Mom and the rest have been living quite comfortably lately, haven't they? Maybe they've been investing in the stock market or something. We could probably expect a decent inheritance. Haha, Rebecca chuckled. Oh, I can't wait. I've been longing for an overseas trip. I also want to design my own handbag. All we can do now is wait for things to wrap up, Dan remarked. Listening to their conversation, tears welled up in my eyes. I couldn't possibly bring myself to tell my husband about this. Unable to confront them, I silently returned to the hospital room. 2 weeks later, he passed away. I remained by his side for a long time, but it was Billy and his wife who offered me comfort, their support a solace in the midst of grief. I managed to hold myself together, and the funeral proceeded smoothly. After the service, with only family remaining, Dan, unable to contain his impatience, broached the topic of Dad's inheritance. What the hell, Dan? We just laid Dad to rest today, Billy immediately reprimanded him, but Dan's glare silenced any further objections. You, the second son, just shut up. With a firm gaze, I intervened. We'll arrange a meeting to discuss the inheritance next week. For today, please just go home. At my words, the elder couple grunted and promptly left. The following week, the cheerful elder couple and the serious younger couple arrived at our home for the inheritance meeting. Facing them, I began, firstly, I should mention that your father's inheritance amounts to about $30,000. What? Dan exclaimed, visibly taken aback by the news. I'd like to split this according to legal inheritance shares, with me taking half and each of you getting a quarter, I explained. Wait, hold on. Are you sure there's only $30,000? Dan persisted, sensing something amiss in my tone. I handed him a thick envelope. All the documents are in here. Please review them, I instructed. After inspecting the documents, Dan and Rebecca's faces twisted in frustration. Damn, Dad was really strapped for cash, huh? So we're only getting $7,500 each. That's too little. If it's this low, give us the house too, Dan demanded, clearly dissatisfied. Billy's response was swift and angry. Our mother still lives in that house. We won't give it up. It's because you wasted money on renovations that we're left with so little. If the inheritance is this small, the house stays with us, he declared firmly. Calmly, I addressed the irritated couple. This house was painstakingly renovated by your father so we could live here in our old age. I won't just hand it over. I'll keep it as long as I live. That's not fair. You can't keep everything to yourself, Dan protested, his fury evident. Billy intervened, restraining his brother. Dad was concerned about Mom until the end. You might not understand it, Dan, he said softly, looking at me with concern. We're going to announce our decision about the inheritance. Mom, you should take our side too. Dad would rest easy knowing that, Billy's wife added, nodding beside him. If they won't share, we'll gladly take their part, Dan insisted. That's impossible. Mom's living on her pension. It's tough. We who are working should be supporting her. Billy scolded his older brother and his wife sincerely, but his words seemed to fall on deaf ears. Just because she's living on her pension doesn't mean we can give our money away, Dan retorted, unyielding. Exactly. Perhaps mother-in-law was planning to siphon off our money from the beginning, Rebecca added, her tone accusatory. The elder couple looked at me with disdain, their expressions sour and disrespectful. Stop acting like parasites. It's a nuisance. Elderly women living on pensions should keep out of everything except for weddings and funerals. Just stay quiet, Dan lashed out. Hey, that's enough. Billy intervened, but I kept my head down, fists clenched. Not only were they wishing for my husband's death, but they also complained about the inheritance and even labeled me as a parasite. I couldn't help but wonder where I had gone wrong in raising him. Regret flooded my heart, and tears threatened to spill from my eyes. But I couldn't afford to lose my composure in this moment. Gathering my feelings, I addressed Dan and Rebecca calmly. I understand what you're saying. Let's sever our ties. At my words, the elder couple looked momentarily surprised before breaking into smirks. Really? That's the best news I've heard, they remarked sarcastically as Dan and Rebecca hurried to leave. Before storming out, they threw one last barb at Billy and his wife, tauntingly calling them to take care of the parasite. As the door closed behind them, Billy and his wife rushed over to me. Mom, are you okay? They're just too awful. We're always by your side. Please don't be upset, they comforted me. Still looking down, I raised my face and met their eyes. Billy and I have something to tell you, I began. A few months later, while relaxing at home, Dan and Rebecca unexpectedly appeared, accompanied by Billy. What's going on? We've severed our ties, haven't we? Dan demanded, his voice raised. Indeed, come on in. I invited them, ignoring their aggressive tone. As they entered, their faces flushed with anger. Billy spoke up with an apologetic tone. Sorry, Mom. When asked about the house, I couldn't help but invite them in. That's fine for now. Everyone please come in, I said, leading them inside. But as soon as the eldest couple stepped into the living room, they began to raise their voices. What do you mean you're giving the house to Billy? You're disregarding us, they protested. I maintained my composure and explained calmly, Billy has promised to maintain the house and preserve your father's memories. That's why I've decided to leave it to him. Dan stared at me, taken aback. What do you mean? He questioned. Billy and Anne have been a great support to me. It's only natural, I replied warmly, thanking them. We're not here to hear that. You said you'd take over the house yourself, didn't you? The eldest couple retorted. Glancing at the eldest daughter-in-law, who seemed ready to explode, I elaborated. I thought I'd hand it over to someone who would respect your father's and my wishes. Besides, I've started receiving some rental income. Their surprise evident, I continued matter-of-factly. Remember last year when my father, your grandfather, passed away? Billy attended the funeral, but you couldn't because you were out of town. Well, your grandfather was a landlord who owned several buildings and apartments. Finally, the inheritance has been settled, and I've started receiving rental income. The eldest couple's faces displayed shock. We never heard anything about that, they exclaimed. About that rental income, how much are we talking about? Dan inquired. It's about $3 million a year, so it's easy for me to give one of the houses to my adorable son and his wife, I revealed. At this, Dan and Rebecca sprang to their feet. Wait, hold on a minute. If Billy and his wife get one, then we should too, they argued. Why should I split my assets with someone who called me a parasite? Wasn't it you who told me to stay away? I shot back sharply. Caught off guard, Dan and Rebecca began to stutter in response. I fixed them with a stern glare and pointed to the door. All right, the conversation is over. Please go home now. Wait, hold on, Mom. Please listen to me. Deanna approached me, flustered, and suddenly clung to my arm. I looked at him coldly. You have no right to call me Mom. Please, you can't just demand a share of the house and money too. We're struggling, the eldest daughter-in-law pleaded loudly. I raised an eyebrow. Struggling? What do you mean? I demanded. Dan hesitated before starting to explain. We thought we'd received Dad's inheritance and lived a bit too luxuriously. We kind of got into debt, he confessed. I forcefully shook off Dan's arm, feeling a surge of disgust. I didn't think you could be this stupid. This is the bed you've made, so you need to lie in it, Dan, I retorted sharply. That's just too cruel, the eldest couple protested, their faces crestfallen. I had the final say. From now on, I'll transfer my assets to Billy while I'm still alive. I won't give a penny to you who cut ties with me. Please never bother us again. Billy stood up to the deflated eldest couple. If you understand, then go home quickly. Don't come near Mom or us ever again, he declared firmly, escorting them to the door. After that, the eldest couple apparently ended up going bankrupt from the debt they incurred. From their rundown apartment, you could hear Dan and Rebecca arguing night after night. For them, who couldn't manage this simple act of cherishing their family, a decent future probably isn't in the cards. As for me, since I passed the house on to Billy, I bought and moved into an apartment nearby that comes with caregiving services. Billy and his wife often come to visit, and they've recently had an adorable baby. I want to continue building a good relationship with Billy's family and cherish each and every day.
I never thought my parents, who doted on my genius younger sister, would tell me I was not needed. One child is enough. We don't need a failure like you. With those words, my parents cast me out while I was still a child. The one who offered me a helping hand in my confusion was my uncle. Sorry for being poor, but let's live together. I took that hand without hesitation. My name is Amy. I am now 30 years old, but I have a complicated past. It's about family circumstances, but first, I want you to hear my story. I was born into a typical family, with a businessman father and a stay-at-home mother. I lived with my grandparents at my father's ancestral home, and my unmarried uncle also lived with us. I started living there when I was 4, and my uncle was 24 at the time. Living with your parents at that age isn't rare. But my uncle had a reason he couldn't leave home. As a child, I didn't know the details, but it seems he was frail from a young age. Even as an adult, he was often ill and couldn't keep a job. Eventually, he became a part-timer, but he could only work a few hours a day. A couple of days a week. It probably wasn't enough income to live on his own. Maybe because he felt a sense of inferiority for still being dependent on his parents. My uncle always looked apologetic. "Damn, what a burden you are." My father would often yell at him, always when the grandparents were not around. My grandparents loved both their healthy son and frail son equally. Due to the recession and reduced income, my father, who relied on his parents, probably wanted to restrain himself in front of them. However, when the grandparents weren't around, he always said terrible things to my uncle and laughed at him with disdain. My uncle, though looking sad, never got angry or talked back. "Why don't you get angry?" I asked innocently as a child. With a troubled look, my uncle replied, "Because it's true that I rely on my parents." Back then, I thought that made sense, but now as an adult, I think my father relies on them too, so he's not in a position to talk. If I had understood that back then, I would have sided with my uncle. As a child who didn't understand, I felt bad when my father yelled at my uncle but couldn't say anything. Even though the atmosphere was tense when the grandparents weren't around, it was peaceful when they were. In front of the grandparents, my uncle would relax and smile, and my father wouldn't show his true feelings. My mother was too busy taking care of me and my 2-year younger sister, Heather, to bother about the relationship between my father and uncle. I thought life would always continue like this. However, everything suddenly changed. My grandparents died in an accident when I was 6 years old. It was very sad and lonely, and I cried a lot. Heather and I cried loudly together. I remember my uncle quietly shedding tears. But what I remember most, what I can't forget, was my father's laughter. Yes, he was laughing. His own parents had died. But he didn't cry once when he rushed to the hospital or during the funeral preparations. It wasn't about being stoically brave. Even as a child, I understood that my father wasn't sad. And that turned into a certainty. On the day of the funeral, my father was laughing. He probably thought no one was watching, but I happened to see him. And I clearly saw that expression. It wasn't a smile that comes from sorrow or confusion. As his daughter, I knew it was a smile from genuine happiness. My father was happy about the death of his parents, probably thinking about the various inheritances. That smile was so ugly that it scared me, and I cried. They must have thought I was crying because the grandparents had died. My uncle gently patted my head and stroked it. Looking up, I saw his tear-stained red eyes, yet they were incredibly kind. What was this? My father and uncle, actual brothers, had such opposite reactions to their parents' death. It was a moment when I felt a great disconnect with my father. After that, my father's attitude drastically changed. First, his treatment of my uncle became overtly worse. Why do I have to care for a useless person like you? Be grateful I even let you live here. If you can't pay rent or anything, I'll take all the inheritance. At the time, I didn't understand, but it was completely unreasonable. The inheritance rights should have been equal between siblings. But my father monopolized it. My uncle could have stood firm or sought legal recourse. But he didn't. Even though he looked sad, no matter what my father said. He didn't argue back or claim his inheritance. Worried about my uncle, who looked increasingly unwell, I asked, "Are you okay?" He weakly smiled and said, "I can't really work properly because of my poor health. It can't be helped." Despite being verbally abused by my father every day, my frail uncle grew thinner and his complexion worsened. Yet, he still smiled at me and said, "I'm okay." However, 3 months after the grandparents' death, my uncle was eventually kicked out of the house. "Get out, you parasite," he was told. And my uncle left without arguing or resisting. "Uncle, I don't want you to go." I was sad about parting from my kind uncle and pulled his arm. But he gently removed my hand and stroked my head. "It's okay. Amy, you're a strong girl. You'll be fine even without me." "Uncle, you're not okay, are you?" My uncle, who couldn't work properly due to his poor health. How was he going to survive alone? I looked at him with tears in my eyes, and he said, "I'll be okay," and left. The farewell to my uncle was sad. But as a child, there was nothing I could do. Moreover, I soon became unable to worry about others. 2 years after the grandparents' death, when I was 8 years old, I was attending elementary school normally. And Heather was 6. About to start elementary school. In kindergarten, they said Heather is smart, my mother started. Maybe she's a genius like me, my father got excited. And impulsively had her take an intelligence test. The result was astonishing. IQ 150. Definitely my genes. Heather scored an incredible IQ of 150. I didn't quite understand. But I knew somehow my sister was amazing. "Heather, you're amazing." "Thank you, big sister." I praised my sister without fully understanding, and she happily smiled. Those were good times. Until then, they were good. After that, it was the worst. "All right, let's get her into a competitive school," my father declared, driven by his mysterious confidence. "She's a genius, so it'll be fine," he said, and my mother became motivated. After that, Heather started attending cram school every day. Naturally, my mother was the one accompanying her, which meant she neglected our home. Then my father started. "Hey, since Mom and Heather are busy, you take care of the house," he said to me. From then on, laundry and cleaning became my responsibility. After school ended, I couldn't play with friends. I had to go straight home and do chores, or I'd be scolded by my parents. If I didn't do them properly, I'd be skipped dinner. "We don't have time to care for a failure like you," they said. "Why can't you score perfectly?" Seeing a score in the 90s on my test, my father yelled at me. "Seriously, learn something from your sister for once," my mother said with exasperation. No matter how well I did on tests or how many races I won at the sports festival, my parents never looked at me, never praised me, they just ignored me. Like a machine, they only ever said, "Learn from your sister Heather." And then they added, "Well, it's probably impossible for you anyway. Heather is a genius, but you are incompetent." Heather really was a genius. She learned rapidly with just a short time at cram school, and passed the entrance exams in no time. As a result, my parents became even colder to me. They spent money on Heather. I couldn't even get new clothes and struggled with the ones I had outgrown. Heather got to eat delicious food. I got leftovers. Heather went on trips. I stayed home alone. My parents blatantly doted only on Heather. "This child will surely be someone great in the future. Then our retirement will be secure," my father would say with a laugh. "A doctor would be good, wouldn't it? Or maybe a lawyer. Even aiming for a politician is not bad. With a genius daughter like Heather, we're super lucky." I was invisible in my parents' eyes. My existence, crying in Heather's shadow, was forgotten. And when I was 10 years old, my parents finally said it. "We need money for Heather's gifted education, so we don't need you." Huh? Confused by what that meant, my father said. "We're saying one child, Heather, is enough." No way. How am I supposed to, by myself? "Well, I'll give you your brother's contact. Here's some pocket money. Figure it out on your own." They really gave me just a small amount of money, and I was truly kicked out. I cried and pleaded at the front door to let me in, but there was no response. The door did not open. Desperate, I headed straight to the station. At 10 years old, I had enough knowledge to manage, even to ride a train. Asking people for directions, I somehow made it to my uncle's apartment. The bell rang, and my uncle came out with the same kind face as I remembered. He was shocked to see me and let me in. When I explained the situation, he was furious. What are my brother and his wife thinking? I felt sorry and depressed even though I wasn't the one being scolded. Wondering if I was just a burden, tears slowly formed in my eyes. Then, a hand gently placed on my bowed head. Just like in my memories, it was a large, warm, kind hand. "It's been tough, hasn't it? You're safe now. But what should I do now? As you can see, I still often get sick and don't make much money, I'm poor," my uncle said with a wry smile. But he looked much stronger than when we lived together before. Maybe being away from my father brought some change in his heart. He looked me straight in the eye and smiled. "Sorry I'm poor, but Amy, if you don't mind, I'd be happy to become your parent." Huh? I mean, in this case, maybe more like a foster father? I might not be very reliable, but... Before he could finish, I jumped into his broad chest. Unlike my father, my uncle's chest felt very safe. "It's all okay now." Relieved, I sobbed uncontrollably, and my uncle gently stroked my back. It felt just like a real parent who genuinely loved me. Since then, I grew up under my uncle's care. Indeed, we were poor and he was often sick, which was tough. But even in poverty, our home had smiles. I had almost forgotten how to smile while living with my parents. But living with my uncle, I began to smile a lot. A poor yet happy family, exactly that. My uncle gave me a lot of love. I worked hard in everything to repay my uncle's kindness. He praised me when I tried hard. Even if the results were bad, he praised the effort. I was so happy I tried even harder. The existence of my parents, who never praised me, eventually faded from my memory. I grew up healthy with my uncle, and 20 years passed in a flash. I turned 30. And now, familiar faces stood before me. Mom, Dad. It's been a while, Amy. You been living well? Smiling was my father, pushed to the back of my distant memories. He had aged considerably, with hardly any hair left. My gaze towards him was cold. Naturally, it was a what now situation. Unperturbed by my icy gaze, my father said, "Well, let's put the past behind us and get along as a family from now on." My response was, "Of course, what? What are you talking about? Get along as a family? Don't joke with me. Figures, a failure like you would speak like that. Can't help it. I'll re-educate you from now. No thank you. Please leave." As my father tried to enter the apartment and I pushed him back, my mother joined in. "Amy, don't be stubborn, rely on us. Living in such a shabby apartment, you mustn't have had a good life. It's none of your business, please leave. Don't be strong-willed. Just let us in." "No, go away." "Let us in." "Go away." They're ridiculous, both in their mid-50s. Supposedly weakened, but still forcefully energetic. No, wait, if it's 2 against 1, of course I'd be pushed back. While thinking nonchalantly, don't cry if you're being pushed. My father managed to get a foot in the door. So I pushed back with all my might like a sumo wrestler. No. Eek. They fell on their butts from the momentum. I naturally looked down on them. "Ah, you're so annoying." "What?" "I'm busy, so can you please leave?" "What's with that attitude? What do you think of us, your parents? The moment you abandoned me, I stopped thinking of you as my parents. But we raised you until you were 10. Until I was 10, huh? I feel like the only time I was properly raised was when my grandparents were still alive. But you managed to survive, didn't you? At that level, you don't have the right to act all high and mighty." As my parents stood up, rubbing their backs, they seemed much smaller. They were only in their 50s, yet they looked old enough to be in their 70s. "You were the ones who said one child, Heather, was enough. Since I have a genius sister, there's no need for you to come see me, right? That's not going to work anymore." My father grimaced bitterly at my words. Did something happen to Heather? Did she become a shut-in? She became a lawyer. Well, good for her. Amazing, isn't it? Just like someone with an IQ of 150. And then she disappeared. Amazing indeed. As I pressed for details, it turned out Heather had entered law school as expected. Went through graduate school and took the bar exam. She didn't pass on her first try, but did eventually. It's unclear. But after some training and whatnot, she officially became a lawyer. And yet, she disappeared? She said, "I won't take care of you guys," and left. Well. So, she abandoned you. Congratulations. That's not a happy occasion at all. That ingrate, returning all the care we've given her with betrayal. Well, there wasn't any love, was there? My parents thought they were doting on my sister. But it probably just felt suffocating for her. Parents who changed completely just over an IQ number. Parents who imposed excessive expectations. Parents who only pressed their own desires under the guise of affection. No wonder my sister had enough. Dad, the company went bankrupt. Tough economy, huh? There's virtually no severance pay. And the unemployment benefits are about to run out. Good for you. Not good at all. But looking for a new job at another company is too tough now. Too tough, huh? I can't help but laugh at their lack of enthusiasm. So, you should take care of us. My laughter instantly stopped. No, thank you. What? Are you saying you'll abandon your parents? The only parent I have is my uncle, who has been raising me since I was 10. Huh? My father looked stunned by my words. You came to this apartment, so you knew I was living with my uncle, right? What's there to be surprised about now? You think of him as your parent? The uncle who gave me all his love is my father. My parents, surprised by my implication that you never gave me any love. So you're not my parents, stared at me. Despite his frail health, my uncle worked hard. He tried his best so I wouldn't have to struggle. And I've worked really hard to repay his kindness. So, you have a decent job then? Pretty decent. I shrugged, and my father suddenly grabbed my shoulder. Let go. So, you're angry, and you're embarrassed. Listen to what I'm saying. No need to hear it all to understand. You were lonely, and you're sulking. That's right. You were always less loved than your sister, so you sulk. But you're happy and embarrassed to meet us, your parents. So, you're at Sundara. Don't just make things up. Don't worry, from now on, I'll be with you as a parent. I don't understand what he means. Is my father already suffering from dementia? I stared blankly at my parents' foolish faces, slowly beginning to laugh. What are you laughing at? Are you happy? No way. Just so you know, I haven't thought about you at all these past 10 years. Thanks to my uncle, I've been living a very fulfilling life. Surprised by my sudden laughter, I continued speaking. You know, I went to university on a scholarship. Oh, so you got a good job then? Yes. I got a job at a pretty famous large company. That's great. And I got married by chance. Oh. Then we must greet your husband too. No need. Yes, we must. It's impossible. He's overseas right now. Oh, what? And by the way, my uncle is also overseas. Huh? My brother too? How can that be? I thought you were living here alone. So I figured that frail guy must be. Don't just assume my uncle is dead. He got an overseas assignment. And it's a great place for rest, so he went with me. My uncle has gotten much healthier and is happily playing with my kids. Well, you have grandchildren too. Bombarded with all this sudden information, my parents looked like their heads were about to explode, their eyes darting around in confusion. I just smiled at them sweetly. At first, my uncle was reluctant about living together. But he finally agreed. We're all living happily as a family now. Then, we could also go overseas. You can, but we won't live together or take care of you. Live on your own money. That's impossible. Are you abandoning your parents? You abandoned me first. Frustrated by their selfish claims, I finally snapped. My parents turned pale. I owe nothing to you since you abandoned me. But I owe a great deal to my uncle. I plan to repay his kindness. At least send us some money. My uncle never touched the money I sent. And he continued to live in this shabby apartment. But he finally agreed to live together there, so I came to make arrangements. What? It's ironic that on the last day I'm leaving this rundown apartment, you show up. What a coincidence. Huh? What? You're leaving? The paperwork is done, and I'm just returning the keys. I'm heading back to my home overseas immediately. What about us? Are you abandoning your own mother? As my mother turned as pale as my father, I nodded emphatically. Thank you for abandoning me, I said with a smile, leaving them speechless. Really, thank you. Because of that, I'm happy now. With those words, I walked past them. How does it feel, the parents who abandoned their daughter? To be abandoned by both daughters? I asked one last question, but no answer came back. I didn't wait for one. And left, knowing this was the real farewell to my so-called parents. Afterward, I returned to my own home overseas. The efforts I put into living alone with my uncle paid off. And I managed to land a job at a good company. Then, I got an overseas assignment and married a man I met there. My uncle cried and blessed us. Now, children have been born. And I've invited my uncle to live with us. I'm happily living with my husband, children, and uncle. And I wish I could find a wonderful man like my sister's husband soon. My sister said, laughing as she watched the children play in the garden beside me. Well, you've finally been freed from our parents' curse. I'm sure you'll find someone great. I need to get used to the work here first. Why don't you get a lawyer's qualification here? I'd rather not be a lawyer. I'm done following our parents' orders. I want to work hard at a job I love. That makes sense. Right after I was abandoned and left home, my sister sent a letter to my uncle. It was about how she couldn't stand our parents' distorted love and pressure. My uncle and I decided to rescue her on her way back from school without letting our parents know. My sister wanted to come live with us too. But my uncle's financial situation couldn't support both siblings. Most importantly, our parents wouldn't allow it. So, she stayed at home until she could leave as soon as she was an adult. It was tough, but my sister overcame the challenges and gained her freedom. Seizing the opportunity when our parents were happy, she became a lawyer. My sister left home. Of course, I helped her with that. She's struggling with the language and adapting to new things here. But she'll be okay. After all, she endured living with our parents. I know no one more patient or hardworking than her. She'll adapt here soon. I'm more worried about my uncle. Uncle, you're going to language school? I said. And my sister nodded with a smile. That's right. It's never too late for anything. His health has improved a lot, and he needs to enjoy life now. Yes, he does. My parents, who had taken all the inheritance for themselves and squandered it, ran out of money quickly. Despite trying desperately to invest in their daughters, they faced unemployment. They sold the house. But since they had taken out loans against it, they ended up with little. They've been begging relatives for money, but everyone has treated them coldly, forcing them into poverty. Relatives have shared with me, chuckling, that my parents are constantly fighting. It's unthinkable to look down on siblings or discriminate among them. Yes, it is. My sister nodded again at my words. No matter what, I will protect you, Heather. I've already received enough protection. Thank you, big sister. When I felt a touch teary from my grown-up sister's words. What protection? A hand was placed gently on my head. Though he seemed smaller and more wrinkled, it was as warm as ever. I turned around, smiling. Thank you. Huh? Seeing my uncle's puzzled face, I laughed and said, Thank you, Dad. I love you. When the New Year's Eve I spent alone was over, my aunt and uncle appeared early in the morning. Vanessa, let's leave this house. They said they had obtained permission to adopt me. I, now their adopted daughter, began to study intensely as a way to repay my aunt and uncle's kindness. 15 years later, as I was making a name for myself on TV, my biological parents reappeared. Then, I decided to execute a certain plan. My name is Vanessa Hansen, and I am 33 years old. I have successfully turned my life around. I have an older sister who was always considered adorable, and was even talked about as potential child actress material in our neighborhood. I should clarify that the person I surpassed was not my sister. Indeed, if I had, my life might have been entirely different. As a child, I was the complete opposite of my pretty sister. My sister was charming, kind-hearted, and smart. She had her persona figured out from a young age, and she was simply perfect. Both my parents and all the adults around adored her. I, on the other hand, was the only one in our family who was chubby. I think our faces looked alike, but my puffy cheeks made me unlike my sister. Not someone everyone liked. I was a shy child with no charm, quite grumpy actually. In elementary school, I was nicknamed Mr. Oppo, a strange name for a girl. But it started when a friend overheard my mother mockingly using it on me. You are the opposite of your sister, and perhaps that's what they overheard. This nickname must have reached my parents' ears because by the time I was in elementary school, they seemed to have lost interest in me. There was also a gap in our academic performance. My sister was always among the top in her class, whereas I was towards the bottom. While my sister would get snacks at 3 p.m., I was denied any. Because my chubby figure was blamed on the snacks even though I didn't eat a lot. Despite that, my chubby figure never changed. The differences didn't stop at snacks. For various reasons like birthdays or because she looked cute at a recital, my sister would get new clothes and shoes. I would get her hand-me-downs, which were often too small for my chubby figure. Even when I asked my parents for larger clothes, they would end the conversation with, "You should lose weight." Unfortunately, at that time, I didn't know what dieting was. The only treasure I had was a backpack given to me by my grandparents before they passed away. Later, my sister went on to a private junior high school, having passed the entrance exams for a famous school with high academic standards. At that time, she was so pretty that there were even talks of her getting scouted as a model. My parents, especially my mother, would proudly walk her down busy city streets to attract scouts. However, I don't recall ever going out with my mother after a certain age. Once, my sister suggested taking me along, but my mother blatantly made a disgusted face and just responded, "Maybe some other time." This only made my sister's kindness highlight my own misery. Years later, I also entered junior high school, but unlike my sister, I went to a normal public school. From the beginning, my parents had declared that they wouldn't waste money on me. Feeling like my life had been sealed away as a child, I thought this was just how siblings were treated. unaware of the abnormality of our family situation. However, as I reached adolescence, I started to question things. My mother, though a housewife with supposedly plenty of time, made me do all the household chores and shopping, while increasing her outings with friends. Whenever I wanted to go out with friends, my father would guilt me about the laundry. My sister, being kind, would sometimes help me. But after moving on to a prestigious high school, she no longer had time for me. The harshness of my parents only intensified over time. The first incident was when they missed a three-way meeting at school. During my 3 years of junior high, they only attended once, in the first year, and never showed up for the second and third years. As exams approached, my teacher expressed concern, but I brushed it off, saying my parents were just busy with work. Then came the New Year's Eve incident. That year, my parents and sister went back to my mother's hometown for the holidays without me, saying I should stay home and study since I was an exam student. Likely, they found me annoying. That New Year's Eve, I spent alone, watching TV in an unusually quiet house, shedding a few tears as I went to sleep. The next morning, the incessant ringing of the doorbell jolted me awake. Hesitantly, I checked the intercom and was surprised to see my maternal aunt and uncle standing there. I rushed to the door, still disheveled, and asked what was going on. "Vanessa, let's leave this house. We've already got permission from your mother. Come with us." I was shaken by this sudden proposal. I didn't understand what they meant by leaving the house. "Vanessa, if you don't hate us, we would like you to become our child." Of course, I had never thought ill of them. On the contrary, I loved my aunt and uncle. They were always kind and smiled during our New Year gatherings, gifting me popular sweets and cute clothes. They paid attention to me when my parents and sister ignored me. My aunt and uncle, having no children of their own, had always treated me like a daughter. I never imagined receiving such an offer from them. After hearing the full situation, it turned out they had just been with my parents and heard something outrageous from my mother. They planned to make me work part-time during my high school days to fund my sister's university education. My uncle spoke with increased fervor as he explained, "We cannot just ignore this situation. Vanessa, you have a right to do anything in your free time." I was stunned. My parents were trying to rob me of my future for the sake of my sisters. Their absence at the parent-teacher conferences over the years suddenly made sense. My parents, uninterested in me, didn't care about my dreams or aspirations. They only thought of exploiting me. "We're not your biological parents, but we promise to make you happy." My aunt said this with tears in her eyes as she hugged me. It was the first time in my life that I felt truly acknowledged by an adult. This sense of security left no room for doubt. I decided to become the adopted child of my aunt and uncle. 15 years have passed since then. My aunt and uncle raised me as their own daughter. I received abundant love and had many enjoyable experiences. My aunt would find delicious restaurants to take me to on holidays, and my uncle, wanting to share a drink with me, prepared a bottle of wine from the year I was born for my 20th birthday. I have warm memories with them that I never could have had with my biological parents. Initially, I called them by their names, but over time, they became nothing less than my real parents, and I naturally began calling them Mom and Dad. My uncle once shared something he heard from my parents during a visit home. "Vanessa is not going to benefit from going to high school. She's not pretty and not smart. We have a talented eldest daughter, so we really don't need a stupid and flawed daughter like her." My aunt and uncle were furious when they heard this. But my parents showed no remorse. They were serious about making me work part-time. That's when my aunt and uncle decided to discuss adoption. Despite it being New Year's Eve, my aunt, who hadn't been drinking, drove to pick me up. I am truly grateful for that. I wanted to repay my dear parents in some way and become a daughter they could be proud of. With that resolve, I studied hard in high school. It was a rush to get into any school, but once I did, I set goals and refocused. My efforts paid off, and I was admitted to a renowned Ivy League. But getting into university wasn't the end. I wanted my parents to have an easier life in the future, so I continued to study hard, even earning a qualification as a meteorologist while in university, and began appearing on TV. As I pursued my goals, refining myself became enjoyable. I hoped to make my parents proud by being an attractive meteorologist. And after dieting and working out, I came to be known as a beautiful weathercaster. I had the potential to be beautiful since I resembled my sister. Then one day, my biological parents suddenly appeared before me. "Vanessa, you've grown up so much. Look how splendid you've become." As I was walking to my car after leaving the TV station, two tired-looking figures appeared before me. Their familiar attitude irked me, but I restrained myself. Their behavior towards me had completely changed. My mother dared to say that her parenting was not wrong, while my father patted my shoulder as if to say, "That's my daughter." Unable to contain my disgust, I glared at them, though they continued speaking nonchalantly. "Since we're here, let's go have a meal at a nice local restaurant." "Yeah, you must be earning a good salary since you're on TV." I felt they were awkwardly trying to ingratiate themselves. Yet their condescending tone from the past would slip through. Instinctively, I knew I should distance myself from them. I needed to make them never want to see me again. Then, I came up with a plan. However, it wasn't time to execute it yet. And a more elaborate opportunity had come to mind. I excused myself, saying I had more work and couldn't join them for dinner today. "Oh, that's disappointing," my mother said with a frown, which I did not miss. I was tempted to shout at them right there, but I prioritized my plan. "There's going to be a small party for my birthday soon, with some people from the TV station. It's a small party, but would it be okay to invite you too? There will be plenty of delicious food, and it'll be fun." Their eyes visibly brightened at my suggestion. "Really? Are actors and such coming because it's a TV station?" "Oh, homie," my mother I said with a laugh as they got excited, thinking all TV personalities are actors or celebrities. In reality, the party was mainly for meteorologists. Most attendees would be from newspapers and TV stations, with the fanciest guests being announcers and MCs. I casually ignored their eager voices, took their contact information, and left with a promise to reach out again. "I'll send you the details for the birthday party." 1 month later, the birthday party took place as planned. Though it was a small party, nearly 100 people gathered. My parents arrived, strutting proudly as if they were showing off their successful daughter. But to me, they were just an embarrassment. Despite my disdain, I had to complete my plan. I greeted them with a smile. "Thank you for coming, Mom and Dad. I have a special message for you two today," I said as I took their hands. They looked pleased but were restless, probably looking for celebrities. They whispered to each other, "Isn't that person from that TV show?" Then, I began my speech on stage. After the customary greetings and some playful heckling from the audience, which I responded to with jokes. I turned to my parents. Today, my parents are also here. I indicated towards my parents, and the lighting technician, catching the cue, spotlighted them. Those are my parents, who, despite abandoning me during my teenage years, have come crawling back now that they've seen me on television. The room buzzed with murmurs at my words. I had hardly spoken to anyone but close friends about my past. Vanessa. What are you saying? My mother stood up, while my father looked on, stunned. I shared about the discrimination I faced as a child and my parents' indifference. I talked about how I was the only one not given snacks, how I was almost solely responsible for household chores, and how my aunt and uncle, furious upon learning that my parents intended to make me work for the sake of my sister, adopted me. I am cheerful and lively today thanks to my aunt and uncle. They are not here today, but I am deeply grateful to them from the bottom of my heart. I believe everyone here knows me as a cheerful person. That's because my aunt and uncle took me in and continuously showed me love, helping me realize that I was not a worthless child. This allowed me to live confidently and become cheerful. The audience seemed shocked to hear my dark past and started expressing sympathy and condemning my parents, who shrank under their gaze. Mr. Reed from Daily Information, you're here, aren't you? Please include everything, my story and photos, in an article. At my request, as a birthday gift. A journalist friend from a magazine I frequently collaborate with, who had already been taking photos of my parents, responded from the stage. No. Stop it, don't take pictures. My parents panicked, covering their faces. Don't run away. Face yourself properly. I shouted at them. When I was little, you forced me to do this and that, and wouldn't listen when I asked you to stop. It's not fair for you to make me do things and then refuse to endure the same. Tears welled up in my mother's eyes as I rebuked them. I'm sorry. Please, no pictures. Do you want to shame your mother and father? Vanessa, you wouldn't like it if your parents were embarrassed, right? Even now, my parents were trying to garner sympathy. However, I didn't even consider these two as my parents anymore. After abandoning everything a parent should be, what right do you have to feel embarrassed now? It would have been better if you knew this shame when I was a child. Honestly, I was embarrassed too. Embarrassed that these people were my parents. I wished I could disappear into a hole. But this was like a ceremony of closure for me. By severing ties with them completely, I felt like I could truly claim my own life, carrying the greatest treasure of gratitude for my aunt and uncle. Before I knew it, I found myself crying. Observing this, some attendees forcibly escorted my parents out of the venue. It's finally over, truly this time. With a sense of accomplishment and overflowing gratitude towards my aunt and uncle, I felt proud of how much I had grown. Tears blurred my vision, but I felt incredibly refreshed. Later, when the magazine asked if I really wanted to go through with publishing my story, I confirmed without hesitation. The response was greater than anticipated. And while some worried it would tarnish my image, the articles were generally favorable, telling the story of a girl who turned her life around and found her true self by cutting off toxic parents. Meanwhile, my biological parents, following the publication, were seen with disdain by their community and moved away as if fleeing. My father had to quit his job due to the rumors, and they were scraping by, my sister informed me. Even after being adopted, my sister kept in contact, visiting me at my aunt and uncle's home and supporting my decision to be adopted. knowing my childhood hardships. I later learned that my sister too suffered from our parents' overbearing nature. Triggered by the publication of my story, she distanced herself from them and is now almost completely estranged. 3 years have passed since then. Mr. Reed, who understood my situation and helped publish the article, has become my husband. We are blessed with 2 children and have built a joyful family. Like the unconditional love my aunt and uncle showed me, I pour equal love into my children, hoping to raise them to be empathetic like my sister, who always watched over me from afar. Yet, I have one more thing to do, to repay my aunt and uncle. This year, as usual, I gifted them a trip for their anniversary. We all went to Florida, my husband, children, aunt, and uncle. They say I shouldn't fuss as I have my own family now. But I do it to see their happy faces. It's more for my pleasure than a repayment. Don't take away my fun, I joke, already planning our next destination. Perhaps a trip abroad. It seems the joys of our family will never cease. It really suits you. That outfit seems like it was made just for you, Becca. While praising my sister Rebecca like that. Our parents adored only her, while ignoring me. They probably don't know about Rebecca's spoiled and unpleasant character nurtured by their favoritism. Seeing me, the most neglected member of the family, Rebecca would scoff. Computer club? So lame. Only nerds join that stuff. That club's just been for boring people for 2 years. Unaware of my feelings, Rebecca hurled these cruel words at me. After graduating high school, I moved out to live alone because my parents told me to leave. Little did I know, a year later, my parents would come crying to me. My name is Amber. When I was 2 years old, my grandparents passed away. And it's been just my parents, my older sister Rebecca by 1 year, and me. My parents have been running a newspaper business. That has been in our family since my great-grandfather's time. Ever since I was little, I've been compared to Rebecca daily. It seemed like I was just an inconvenience to my parents. They had no interest in me and only doted on Rebecca. I realized this around kindergarten, when I always had to wear Rebecca's hand-me-downs. Whether it was clothes, shoes, or even toys and utensils, everything I had was once used by her. Did they ever buy anything just for me? Rebecca always received whatever she wanted from our parents. It really suits you. That outfit seems like it was made just for you, Becca. Rebecca, fluttering her cute white frilled dress, looked happily at herself in the mirror. I'm so happy with this. I love you, Mom. She hugged our mom with a full smile. But you can't wear this to school. Let's choose something simpler and more comfortable for school. Rebecca always had plenty of clothes, some for home and others specifically for school. I just watched from the side. I never craved clothes, but it always made me envious. That Rebecca alone received new things, exactly what she wanted from our parents. Here, Amber, take this. But this doesn't really suit you, does it? My parents call Rebecca by the nickname Becca. But they just refer to me by my name without any affectionate term. Saying this, they handed me the worn-out clothes Rebecca had dirtied. Pants covered in mud and a shirt with a stretched neckline. Of course, there were cute skirts that Rebecca had worn too. However, they never suited me at all. Indeed, Rebecca and I look nothing alike. Rebecca has big, bright eyes like our mother, silky long hair, and fair skin. Anyone would say she looks cute. On the other hand, I resemble our father, with double-lidded eyes, short curly hair, and a skin tone that tans easily. No matter what clothes made for Rebecca I wore, they would never suit me. I once said I wanted to grow my hair long too. Amber, even if you grow your hair out, you won't look like Becca. Don't you agree, honey? Yes, that's right. Just as your mom says. It's not that I wanted to become Rebecca. I just admired the princesses with long hair I saw on TV. My mom, imposing her opinions without listening to mine. Rebecca goes to the beauty salon monthly, but I've never been taken there. My hair would just get curlier and look less cute the longer it got. So my mom would cut it as soon as it grew a bit. Dad loves Rebecca too, though not as much as Mom does. However, he seems unable to stand up to Mother, always agreeing with her. Mom often said, "It would have been better if Amber had been a boy." My parents always wanted a son. This was due to pressure from my grandparents, who believed one isn't complete without a son. My mom faced considerable pressure, and they were greatly disappointed to find out I was a girl. Perhaps that's why they think I'm not cute. Once I started elementary school, I continued to be compared to Rebecca at school. As always, I was only given Rebecca's hand-me-downs to wear. "Is that girl over there really your older sister, Amber?" Pointing at Rebecca, who was wearing twin tails and pink pants, a friend asked. "Yeah. We don't look alike, do we?" Often told we didn't look alike. I had developed a habit of saying it first before anyone else could. After others would say we don't look alike, they would often add, "Your sister is prettier. She would look good in anything." Every time I was compared to Rebecca, it felt like my heart was wearing down. By the second grade of elementary school, everyone knew Rebecca was my sister, but my friends stopped comparing us. I had also made some close friends, and I looked forward to spending time with them at school more than being at home. Plus, I loved studying. Discovering things I didn't know was thrilling. I had started to always score perfectly on tests, and I looked forward to showing my parents. That day too, I wanted to be praised by my parents, so I showed them my test answers. Surprisingly, they praised me. "Wow, isn't that great? Oh, at least you can study. Keep it up." Never usually praised, I was happy that my parents showed some interest in me. I wasn't working incredibly hard at my studies, I just enjoyed what I was doing. And it showed in my test results. I wasn't good at sports, but Rebecca excelled in them. Conversely, Rebecca wasn't good at studying, which was the one area I surpassed her in. Despite my better grades, my parents still cared more about Rebecca. Seeing my better performance seemed to upset her. And when Rebecca complained to our mother, she said gently, "It's okay if you're not good at studies. You can live without that. A woman just needs to be charming. We'll take care of everything else, so Rebecca, do what you like." This is how our parents spoiled Rebecca, and as a result, her grades didn't improve but rather declined. As the years passed, Rebecca's character worsened. "I'm so cute, why is my sister so ugly? I wish I had a cuter sister." I was surprised when Rebecca thought of herself as cute. Whenever someone praised her as cute, "I'm not cute at all," she would say. I didn't know how to respond when she said such things to me. I was at a loss for words, and when I didn't respond, "Don't think you've beaten me just because you can study," she said, and left for the living room where our parents were. I never thought of such a thing. As you can see, though we were sisters, we were never close. By the 4th grade, my parents had me helping with the newspaper business. On weekends, I'd wake up at 4 a.m. to help with inserting ads and sorting deliveries. I was the only one forced to help. I never saw Rebecca helping. On weekends, she slept as much as she wanted. She disliked getting her hands dirty from touching the newspapers. I was the only one made to help, but I didn't mind it much. Waking up early seemed to suit my body well, and I enjoyed the slow mornings. I also liked reading newspapers and looked forward to being the first to read them. Most of our employees seemed to know that my parents only doted on Rebecca. At the workplace, my parents would always boast about how cute Rebecca was, or how they couldn't bear to see her in any pain. Maybe that's why everyone was so kind to me and talked to me a lot, which made me very happy. Even if it was out of sympathy, it felt like people acknowledged my existence. And some people would even give me pocket money secretly, unbeknownst to my parents. You're still in elementary school but always doing so well. Use this to buy something you like. With those words, I was handed a few dollars. Though it was just a small amount, to me at that time, it was worth so much more. I was only praised by my parents when I did well on tests. Knowing that someone was watching over me made me incredibly happy. I saved the pocket money without spending it, hiding it behind books on my bookshelf so nobody would find it. Time passed, and we became junior high students. I was pondering which club to join. Rebecca, skilled only in sports, joined the volleyball team and became a star player. Naturally, our parents were overjoyed, providing transportation to games, and even managing her diet and massage care, acting like personal managers. I, not good at sports, ultimately decided to join the computer club. I became engrossed in tasks like typing and programming, skills that improved the more I practiced. Computer club? So lame. Only nerds join that, right? Computer club? That club's just been for boring people for 2 years. Rebecca didn't think there was any value in me joining the computer club since it wasn't a competitive environment. Ignoring her comments, I started on my homework. Over time, I stopped talking to Rebecca, who constantly looked down on others. In the computer club, I made close friends and enjoyed my daily activities. I became particularly close with a senior named Fred, who had recently moved to the neighborhood. We talked so much that I forgot he was my senior, and naturally, we started walking to and from school together. Rebecca did not like this. Why is someone as plain as you walking home with a guy? Apparently, Rebecca had come home early one day and seen me walking with Fred. Fred, tall and sociable, had quickly become popular after transferring to our school. Rebecca was displeased that I was getting attention or that I was close with a boy. Normally, I would ignore her, but that day I responded. Fred is in the computer club, you know? The one you called a lame group full of nerds. And what I do and who I befriend is none of your business, Rebecca. Stop picking on me all the time. Instead of always speaking ill of others, why don't you study? If you can't talk about anything else, then leave, you're disturbing my studies. I intended only to retort a little, but my pent-up feelings overflowed. Just because you're plain doesn't mean you can act all high and mighty. With no comeback, Rebecca stormed out of the room after slamming the door. Lacking vocabulary, she couldn't respond further. My parents were unaware of Rebecca's poor character. In front of others, she always acted demure and played the part of a gentle girl. One day in the second year of junior high, as Fred and I were walking home, he said, "Your family seems pretty tough, huh?" "Really?" "We always start out early because of the newspaper business." "Isn't your situation tougher? Your mom works as a hairstylist and she's a single mom, right?" We were close enough to talk about our families. By our third year, Fred had retired from club activities to prepare for high school exams. and we walked home together when our schedules allowed. It's not that. Your mom told my mom that she always dotes on Rebecca. Probably, my mom had spoken in their usual way to Fred's mom, who lived nearby. Because she had heard about me from Fred. Amber is good at studying and computers, she's really great. She reportedly said to my mom. But my mom responded. Amber is neither beautiful like Rebecca nor does she have any talents. Fred's mom got worried about me hearing that. I see. I'm used to it, so it doesn't bother me much. I replied cheerily, and Fred, as if hurt himself, chuckled and changed the subject. You should get your hair cut by my mom sometime. She wants to meet you. Surprised by his sudden suggestion, I was honestly pleased. I had been cutting my own hair, but from then on, I started having it cut by Fred's mom, deepening our relationship. Meanwhile, Rebecca, now in her 3rd year, was finally trying to study. But her grades didn't improve much, unsurprisingly given her usual lack of effort. However, our parents seemed unworried. You don't need to try so hard at studying. We'll send you to a private school, just do what you like. Despite not having much money, they were set on sending her to a school that allows payment for admission. I vowed never to be such indulgent parents as I watched this unfold. True to my mom's word, Rebecca attended a casual private high school and started dorm life, leaving home. With Rebecca gone, my life didn't change much except for the absence of her sarcasm. My parents still showed little interest in me, and I continued to focus on my studies, club activities, and helping with the newspaper business. Later, I joined the local high school where Fred was already attending, and joined the computer club there, resuming our walks to and from school. As we discussed school and home life, we grew closer and started dating. With hardly any conversation at home, the time spent with friends at school and with Fred became my only joy. Towards the end of my sophomore year in high school, Rebecca came home with important news one day when I was called into the living room. I actually have someone I want to marry. It's Scott. Rebecca showed a photo of a man 5 years older than her, who was working at an IT company. He looked like a refreshing and decent young man, and Rebecca seemed quite smitten. He's rich and kind, and he tells me I'm cute every day. He said he wants to marry me after I graduate, and I can just stay home and not work. She planned to live together after graduation. Rebecca intended to become a housewife as Scott suggested, without pursuing college or a job. I listened with a detached feeling to her seemingly too good to be true plan. However, our parents were thrilled at the news. That's great. Now we'll have a son-in-law in the family. And he's even coming to live with us. Since we're getting a son-in-law, you're not needed anymore. Once you graduate high school, please leave this house. I couldn't understand why getting a son-in-law meant I had to leave. But I had no intention of staying with my parents forever. I felt somewhat excluded from their happy world, but by then, I didn't really care. Got it. I responded plainly and returned to my room to start looking for a part-time job right away. I needed to work to support myself after graduation. Having never worked before, I discussed this with Fred. His mother's hair salon needed help, so I was hired to assist with tasks I could do without a beautician's license. Though I thought I was fine with leaving my parents' house, talking to Fred about it suddenly made me cry. It was hard being treated coldly by my parents. I had wanted to be cared for too. Overwhelmed by sadness and frustration, Fred hugged me gently. For me, Fred had become an irreplaceable part of my life. In my senior year of high school, I cleaned at Fred's mom's salon and took on other jobs I could do without a license. like working at a grocery store and a family restaurant. I didn't pursue further studies, dedicating my time to work instead. Thanks to the pocket money I had secretly received from the newspaper employees and my earnings from the part-time jobs, I managed to save enough to start living on my own. I graduated from high school and got a full-time job at a local company, moving away from home. On the day I left, I said goodbye to my parents. Thank you for everything. I have no plans to return to this house. Of course. You don't need to come back. My mom, who seemed pleased that I was leaving the house, kept smirking the entire time. She even muttered about needing to quickly clean up my room to prepare for Rebecca's arrival. Amidst this, my father finally spoke up. Do it properly. And make sure not to bother anyone. His words could be taken as encouragement, but it seemed more like he meant not to bother them. I was just happy to finally say goodbye to this house and left with a feeling of relief. My uninterested parents never asked where I was employed or where I would be living. The old me might have been sad about their indifference, perhaps even crying over it. But now, I have people who care about me and need me. Just knowing that was enough. I headed to their place, which was just a few minutes' walk from my parents' house. I was going to live with Fred. Rewinding a bit to the fall of my senior year in high school, I had secured a job and was looking for a place to live. Around that time, I had finished my job hunting and was consulting with Fred about finding a house. After graduating, he was living alone while attending a beauty school in the city where I had found a job. Although we couldn't meet often, we managed to go on dates about once every 2 months. And our relationship was going well. Why don't we just live together? It'll save money, and we can be together all the time. There are only benefits, right? When I struggled to find a suitable place, Fred made that suggestion. Really? I was surprised when Fred suddenly brought it up, but I was happy to hear his proposal, as I would need an adult's help to sign a rental agreement before finishing high school. And I had no reliable adults to turn to. I was worried about what to do. Then Fred continued in a softer voice. Plus, I plan to marry you someday. It's just happening a bit sooner than expected. He seemed embarrassed as his voice trailed off. Watching him, I felt a deep affection. Thus, we decided to move in together with the intention of eventually marrying. Fred's mom was, of course, thrilled. She even drove us to Fred's apartment. There will be a lot ahead, but work through it together with Fred. I think of you like my own daughter. You can talk to me about anything, anytime. I was so touched by her words that I looked up to avoid crying and replied, yeah, I'll do my best. After graduating high school, I started living with Fred and immersed myself in my job. My work involved using computers, specifically developing business improvement software for companies. It required specialized knowledge, which I learned on my own while facing daily challenges. Fred was attending vocational school and working part-time. We couldn't afford a lavish lifestyle, but having Fred, who cherished me, and coming home to share our daily experiences over dinner made for a simple, happy life. A year into my job, when I had gotten used to the work, I noticed multiple missed calls on my phone from my mom, over 20 of them. Due to my busy schedule, it wasn't unusual to miss calls during work. But this many was excessive. Curious but cautious, as I hadn't been in contact with my parents for over a year, I suspected it couldn't be good news. Preferring to avoid any involvement with my family, I intentionally ignored the calls. I decided not to answer if I noticed the phone ringing. The next day, however, I was woken up by the persistent ringing on a holiday morning. It was still 6 a.m. The caller ID showed it was my mom. Calling from this early in the morning could only mean trouble. I reached for my phone, intending to reject the call and block the number. But groggily, I accidentally answered. Finally, you picked up my call. I've been calling so many times, you should at least call back. Hearing my mom's voice after more than a year brought back memories of the stifling life at home, giving me an unpleasant feeling. I should have hung up immediately, but I responded. What do you want, calling me so early in the morning? Already irritable from being woken up, and now even more so because it was my mom. I couldn't help but respond in a harsh tone. Fred, startled by my voice, woke up as well. But my mother continued as if my circumstances didn't matter. We've lost our home. So, we're going to live with you, just be ready for that. What? That makes no sense. Just tell me your address. What was she talking about? I thought I was just confused because I was half asleep, but it didn't seem so. They hadn't contacted me in over a year. And now they wanted to live with me because they had lost their home? I didn't know and didn't care why they had lost their home, but what an audacious plan. I let out all the frustration I had been holding back. After all this time ignoring me, now you say this? You always favored Rebecca over me, showed no interest in me. And you were the ones who kicked me out, weren't you? If you're in trouble, just ask Rebecca, your favorite daughter. My complaints poured out uncontrollably. My mom, taken aback by my reaction, tried to calm me down. Just calm down, Amber. This isn't the time to talk about that. After a brief silence, she began explaining the reason for her call. Rebecca and her fiancé, Scott, had followed their plan. She moved in with him after graduation and became a housewife. But she couldn't handle being a housewife at all. Rebecca, who had never done any household chores or laundry, was constantly failing. It was typical for her to burn the food, and it took her too long to cook. She didn't know how to use seasonings properly, so her dishes were unappetizing. And the kitchen was always a mess with dirty dishes scattered around. And oil splattered everywhere. She also didn't know how to use the washing machine properly and couldn't even iron a shirt. When Scott came home tired, he would find the house in disarray. And the table set with meals that were both unappealing and unpalatable. He was reaching the end of his rope with her incapacity to handle household chores. That's expected. She never did any chores, and you never asked her to. But Rebecca was really trying for Scott. Scott, who liked Rebecca's looks, hoped she would improve over time. He sent her to cooking classes and patiently observed her progress. Rebecca gradually got better at cooking and managing the household. Half a year after they moved in together, they got married. Also, Scott really thought about our family too. Scott, who worked at an IT company, had plans to expand the family's newspaper business after becoming independent. He had even inspected the family home and came up with specific proposals. Seeing this, my parents dreamt that the newspaper could grow much larger in the future. To make this dream a reality, and because they were uncertain about their own future, they transferred the ownership of the family home to Rebecca. When she started living with Scott, there was no need to rush changing the house's title. That was our mistake. Their dream was ultimately destroyed by Rebecca. Shockingly, Rebecca had an affair with a man who taught at the cooking school Scott had enrolled her in. Scott often had to travel for work, leaving the house empty. Although he tried to come home early on weekdays to share meals together, His frequent business trips meant he was often away. Feeling lonely, Rebecca succumbed to the advances of the instructor and began an affair. Rebecca has always hated not being the center of attention, hasn't she? Given Rebecca's penchant for attention, it's unsurprising she would do this. That's not all. She wasn't just unfaithful with one person. Encouraged by the fact that Scott hadn't discovered her affair with the instructor, Rebecca had affairs with several other men. Scott found out when he saw the credit card statements. Rebecca, who had improved in household tasks but was still hopeless with numbers, was not trusted with managing finances, so Scott had handled them. He discovered her infidelity from the records of her stays at inns with her lovers and shopping at high-end men's fashion stores while he was on business trips. She also treated herself to expensive cosmetics and bags, seemingly treating the credit card as a limitless spending tool. Unbeknownst to her, all these expenditures were tracked, including the times she let her lovers drive Scott's car, leaving clear travel records. Thanks to Rebecca's foolishness, evidence of her affairs was quickly compiled. One would think to be more cautious if engaging in affairs. I could only be astounded by Rebecca's actions. Confronted with evidence of her infidelity, Scott demanded a divorce. Of course, he also demanded compensation. And compensation for the expenses Rebecca had incurred for herself. There's no way Rebecca has that kind of money. Having never worked or saved, Rebecca refused to pay the compensation. She depended on men and vanished, becoming uncontactable. The only asset left was the family home, which had been transferred to her name. Unable to make payments, the property was seized, and the newspaper business halted. Consequently, my parents were evicted and called me in desperation. Even after hearing everything, I felt no sympathy. So you don't have a place to live, and now you turn to me? That's far too convenient. It doesn't mean we should live together just because you're in a tough spot. Angry and trembling, I was at a loss for words when Fred took the phone from me. Please don't ever contact Amber anymore. I will make her happy. Fred had listened to the entire conversation and hung up abruptly. He then turned to me, saying I had done really well up to now, and gave me a comforting hug. I cried in Fred's arms for a while before calming down. It seemed I was only ever a convenience for my parents. Realizing this was sad, but I was truly fortunate to have Fred by my side. I blocked my parents' numbers and focused more intensely on my work. My only concern was for the employees who worked for my family. Unable to stay still, I contacted several of them. They all reassured me not to worry. Most of them could manage a living without their newspaper job. In fact, they were more concerned about me. I'm living happily. Thank you all so much for caring about me and even giving me pocket money. They all responded with warm words. Scott had hired a detective to locate Rebecca. She had been hiding out, moving between the homes of acquaintances. Although the family home was seized, it wasn't worth much as it was neither new nor particularly valuable. Rebecca was pursued for the remaining compensation payments. She had never worked before but was now struggling to make ends meet through night work. Though reality proved harsher than expected. Unable to cover her debts through night work alone, she desperately sought daytime employment, eventually being hired as a cashier. Though she struggled even with simple calculations, and often received complaints from customers, Scott intended to ensure she paid every penny owed. As for my parents, after being kicked out, they moved between friends' homes while trying to locate Rebecca. They were also burdened with repaying the loans they had taken out for Rebecca's private education. With the newspaper business gone, their home lost, and their daughter missing, all they were left with were debts. Stressed, my mother frequently lashed out at my father, who eventually couldn't bear it and divorced her. The loans had been in her name, leaving her to struggle with repayments alone. This was all recounted to me by Fred's mother. This story had become quite the local scandal, and there was no one who hadn't heard about it. It was bad of Rebecca to always rely on her parents, who never encouraged her independence. From my perspective, they all reaped what they sowed. Years later, Fred and I got married. Fred achieved his dream of opening his own hair salon and was busy with its success. My dedication at work was recognized, and I grew to participate in major projects. I'm now on leave, expecting our first child with Fred. Although it's my first pregnancy and comes with its anxieties, I have a strong ally, my mother-in-law, who treats me like her real daughter and has been a tremendous support. I respect and rely on her like she's my own mom. With Fred and my mother-in-law by my side, I'm confident our child will be born healthy. I'm committed to ensuring my child doesn't have to endure what I did. I'm going to form a family that's always happy and smiling. Why did you pour wine on the wedding dress? How could you ruin your sister's big day like that? Are you even a real sister? On my sister's wedding day, Mom slapped my cheek after screaming that at me. Ouch! What? Why all of a sudden? I was shocked by Mom's sudden actions and was speechless. I would never do such a thing to my dear sister's wedding dress. I tried to deny it desperately, but Mom wouldn't believe me. And even the groom started accusing me. However, a shocking truth and plot would soon come to light. My name is Kim. I'm 26 years old. I have a sister who is 3 years my junior. Her name is Amber, and we've been very close since we were children. Amber has always wanted to be a nurse, and now she's fulfilling her dream, working as a nurse in a general hospital. Nursing is very demanding and often tough, but she finds it rewarding and wants to continue in this profession. Meanwhile, I work as a tax accountant. I've been working at the same accounting firm since graduating from university. We're both single and live at our parents' house, which is within commuting distance from our workplaces. Our father passed away a few years ago due to an illness. Since then, it's been the three of us living together. Although my mom and I don't always see eye to eye due to her spending habits, which she never seems to correct despite my repeated warnings. One day, it was decided that Amber would get married and she brought her fiancé home. Nice to meet you. I'm John Simpson, and I've been dating Amber. John is 28 years old and works at a bank. He seemed very refreshing, and I felt that Amber could be safely entrusted to him, so I heartily celebrated their union. Amber, congratulations. I'm so glad you found such a wonderful person. Thank you, Kim. Amber smiled radiantly, making me happy as if it were my own happiness. Mom also seemed happy about her marriage. With the marriage, Amber was going to move out and start a new life in a new home with John. Soon after, we received the wedding invitations. Amber had managed to reserve the wedding venue she had always dreamed of. I was also asked to give a speech, and as I prepared it, I eagerly looked forward to the wedding day. Saying there was no sadness in seeing Amber get married would be a lie. But more than that, I wanted her to be happy. I bet Amber will look beautiful in her wedding dress. I might even cry. With those thoughts, I was really looking forward to the wedding day. The day of the wedding arrived. It was a clear sunny day, as if the weather itself was blessing Amber and John. I had planned to bring a wedding board, but because of work, I was running late and brought it to the venue earlier. Then planned to give it to the newlyweds. Amber, sorry for the late wedding board. And truly, congratulations. I'm glad we could celebrate this day. Wow, what a wonderful wedding board. Thank you so much, Kim. Amber thanked me with a sparkling smile. I also extended my congratulations to John. Congratulations, John. Please take good care of Amber. However, for some reason, John slightly grimaced. Yes, thank you. I noticed John's strange expression for a moment, but it was the wedding day. And I thought he might just be nervous, so I didn't dwell on it too much. Soon, it was time for Amber and John to get ready, so I waited in the family waiting room. As the ceremony time approached, there was no call to move from the staff. Huh? The ceremony time is about to start. Maybe they're having trouble with the preparations? As I wondered, there was a loud bang. And the door was rudely opened. I turned toward the door in surprise and saw Mom standing there, pale and out of breath. Mom. What's going on? As I asked in confusion, Mom stormed up to me. Kim. Why did you pour wine on Amber's wedding dress? That's terrible. No sooner had she shouted this than she slapped my cheek hard. Ouch. What? Why all of a sudden? Caught off guard by the sudden incident, I couldn't grasp what was happening. My left cheek stung painfully where Mom had slapped me. It was the first time I had ever been slapped by someone. You're the one who poured wine on Amber's wedding dress, aren't you? Why would you do that? Mom glared at me furiously. What? What are you talking about? I would never do such a thing. I would never pour wine on my precious sister's wedding dress. I desperately denied it, but it seemed like Mom truly believed I was the culprit. In fact, Amber's wedding dress is really in such a terrible state. Feeling the blood drain from my face, I quickly followed Mom to the makeup room where Amber was. Indeed, just as Mom said, Amber's wedding dress was stained bright red. And the scent of wine was unmistakable. It was clear that someone had poured wine on her wedding dress. What is this? This is too terrible. While muttering to myself, I turned towards Amber, who stood there dumbfounded in front of her wedding dress. Amber, do you know when the wine was poured? When I asked her, she slowly opened her mouth. Yeah. I went to the restroom before changing into my dress. But when I came back, it was like this. It seems that someone did this terrible thing while Amber was in the restroom. Who could do such a thing? I began, but Mom shouted. Stop playing dumb. The culprit is Kim. Mom. I'm telling you that I didn't do it. I would never tarnish Amber's dress. Why do you think it was me? I asked Mom wearily, and then she started making an outrageous claim. I saw you sneaking into the makeup room with a bottle of wine. I was wondering what she was up to because she was acting so suspiciously. No. It's a false accusation. I didn't do it. As I vehemently denied it, John looked at me with a stern gaze. Kim. I never imagined you would do such a thing. Was your blessing for us just a lie? John, you too. How many times do I have to say I didn't do it? We can't have a wedding in this dress. We'll have to cancel it. Kim, you will take responsibility for ruining our wedding. No, that can't be. But I really didn't do it. Although John accused me harshly, I kept arguing back that I hadn't done it. Stop being so stubborn. Kim, just admit it already. And take full responsibility for ruining the wedding. Why do you insist I'm the culprit? I'm telling you I saw you entering the makeup room with wine. It has to be Kim who did it. As John and Mom continued to accuse me, Amber, who had been silent until then, seemed to realize something and shouted, "Kim, run!" I nodded at her words and dashed off immediately. Wait. Hold on. I could feel Mom and John chasing after me from behind. If they caught me in a deserted place, they might even resort to violence. I had already been slapped by Mom. I escaped into a control room filled with staff, waiting for Mom and John. I finally caught up. Kim, running away is useless. Mom and John caught up to me, panting heavily and glaring at me. This tragedy is all because of you, Kim. Just give up quietly and take responsibility. You'll also pay for all the wedding costs, and after you've paid. John also shouted, his face twisted into a grin. Are you still saying that? No matter what you say, I didn't do it. I firmly denied the accusations, but John, looking frustrated, declared, "The wedding is cancelled. It's all your fault, Kim." The wedding venue staff tried desperately to calm down John and Mom. But they were not listening. At that moment, Amber arrived with another staff member. The staff member said, "We've heard all about the situation. There are surveillance cameras in the makeup room, so let's watch the footage together." Upon hearing this, John and Mom started to panic. What? There are surveillance cameras? No, well, there's really no need to check them, right? Right, Mom? Yes, that's right, John. We don't need to see the footage from the surveillance cameras when I saw Kim entering and leaving with the wine with my own eyes. John and Mom clumsily insisted that they didn't need to see the camera footage. Amber calmly told them, "John, Mom, let's check the surveillance cameras. I can't believe Kim would do such a thing, and I'm sure she didn't do it." Amber. It was comforting to know that Amber believed in me. Let's all go and check the footage together. You can watch it in that room over there, the venue staff directed. Mom began to protest loudly. Wait. Let's not after all. Everything up to now, forget it. Maybe I remembered wrong when I said I saw it. Yes, I was kind of panicking too. Sorry about that. Let's just call off the wedding for today and leave it at that. As the two of them spoke nonsense, I reached my breaking point. Don't joke around. I've been accused of ruining my dear sister's wedding dress. There's no way I can just leave it like this. I will definitely check the surveillance footage. At my shout, John and Mom flinched. Amber and I, along with the venue staff, went to check the surveillance footage. Mom and John watched us from a distance, looking uncomfortable. The footage clearly showed John pouring wine onto the wedding dress. So it was John all along. I knew it. It didn't make sense for Kim to do such a thing. And it's impossible security-wise at the venue. And yet, John and Mom kept stubbornly accusing Kim. That's. John tried to make excuses, but he was at a loss for words. And John kept demanding that Kim take responsibility for canceling the wedding, not just pay for the dress. I realized that John and Mom might have been conspiring to take money from Kim. Amber, so that's why you told me to run? Amber nodded at my question. Enraged, I confronted John and Mom. Why did you do this? Just like Amber said, were you two trying to get money from me? No, more importantly, how could you do this on what was supposed to be the brightest day of Amber's life? John then laughed defiantly, his face contorting unpleasantly. Shut up. Don't yap about it, you sisters. Just shut up. I've always been dissatisfied with Amber being just a nurse. What? Amber was shocked by his words. Being a nurse means working nights and it's incredibly busy. And the salary isn't great either. So I thought it'd be more beneficial to marry Kim, who is a tax accountant making good money. What? Stunned by his absurd reasoning, it turned out that John had discussed switching from Amber to me with Mom, who had agreed because she owed John money. They had planned this whole scheme where John would ruin Amber's wedding dress with wine, cancel the wedding, pin the blame on me, and force me to take responsibility. It's impossible for such a plan to succeed. It's too despicable. You both are out of your minds. If you were dissatisfied with Amber's profession, why didn't you discuss it before marriage instead of concocting such a plan to forcefully go through with the wedding? Disgusted, I sighed heavily. Amber, red-faced with anger, screamed at John and Mom. John, I never thought you'd be such a scumbag. And you too, Mom. How could you participate in such a plan and still call yourself a mother? John then snapped back, shut up. Just listen to me. As John began to get violent, his own parents and other relatives quickly restrained him, and the police were called. You are annoying, Amber. You should just give me the money and take care of my parents. Don't defy me even though you're a woman. While ranting, John was taken away by the police. Naturally, the wedding was cancelled. After being grilled by the police, John had to pay a significant amount of money for the cancellation fee. Because of this, his savings were insufficient, forcing him to take on debt. Lectured by relatives and known at his workplace for the incident, John lived a restricted life. Even if he wanted to quit his job, the massive debt made it impossible. Meanwhile, Amber and I declared our disownment of Mom. Amber, Kim. I'm sorry. I was in financial trouble and had borrowed a lot from John. So I had no choice but to cooperate. Mom, both Amber and I have been sending you money. But we're cutting that off, of course. As I spoke coldly, Mom's face fell in despair, and she clung to us, crying. Don't stop the remittances. Please. We're a blood-related family. Why would you treat me so harshly? The one who treated one's blood-related family harshly was you. Mom. I can never forgive you. I don't ever want to see your face again. Amber shouted, but Mom kept begging, please don't stop the remittances. Staring at her disdainfully, Amber and I prepared to move out and left the house. We rented apartments close to each other and began our new lives. After a while, Amber started dating a sincere man from her workplace. And I started going out for meals with a fellow tax accountant from my cohort, hoping things would work out well. We have no idea about Mom's current situation and have no intention of ever getting involved with her again. We hope she reflects on what she did. Amber and I keep in touch often, enjoying peaceful and happy days together. Oh, you are back. Have you found out the baby's gender yet? Surely, it's a boy, right? No. According to the doctor, it's a girl. What? At that moment, my mother-in-law grabbed a box cutter from the table and pointed it at me. Say it again. It's a boy, right? No. It's a girl. What's so cute about a girl? Girls can't be heirs, and we don't need one. Not having a boy to continue the family line, you really are useless. I was hoping for a boy too. After spending so much on fertility treatments, a girl is unacceptable. The moment it was revealed that the child I was carrying was a girl, my mother-in-law's face turned flushed, and she started yelling at me with the box cutter in hand. I was shocked and fell down, but at the same time, anger welled up from the depths of my heart. What does she think a child's life is? And who does she think she is? I got it, then I will leave with this child. Girls are unnecessary, right? With those words, I left the house. However, I was not going to let it end there. Later, I gave birth to a healthy child. Then, my panicked husband and mother-in-law came to visit me. The shocking truth about the child I revealed left them both astonished. It was too late for them to regret what they had done to me, and the hurtful words they had said to my unborn child. I am a housewife living in LA with my husband. I turned 30 this year, and finally managed to get pregnant with our first child. Until recently, we had been struggling with infertility. And despite trying to conceive since we got married, we had not been blessed with a child. We went through fertility treatments, and when I finally became pregnant, I was so happy I cried, but it wasn't an easy journey. My husband supported me through the fertility treatments, but my mother-in-law constantly complained. It's been 3 years since you got married, and you still haven't had a child? Well, I didn't intend to tell you this, but I seem to have a body that's hard to get pregnant. I do want a child, though. Do you mean you can't have children? Not exactly. It seems to be difficult because of my constitution. I wish you could see it in a longer perspective. Every time I visited my in-laws, my mother-in-law would bluntly ask whether we still hadn't had a child or if our marital life at night was adequate. Since I was struggling with infertility, her words deeply hurt me, and I had discussed it with my husband several times. Although he talked to his mother about it, her attitude only worsened instead of improving. Are you undergoing fertility treatment? I hear it costs a lot every month. Is that true? Yes, so I'm also working part-time to support our household. As you get older, the chances of getting pregnant decrease, and the risks increase. That's why I'm paying to increase those chances. You're causing trouble for my son with your body condition. Don't you feel sorry? Seriously, this is why. Day by day, my mother-in-law's behavior worsened, and I was honestly very stressed. Does this woman not have the ability to read people's feelings? I wish she could understand my situation a bit more and not add to my stress. However, my mother-in-law had no such kindness. Besides, pregnancy was a matter between my husband and me, and I wanted her to leave it alone. Her meddling was stressful, and that stress contributed to my infertility. She just wouldn't try to understand that and kept imposing her thoughts on me. I had almost given up having children. That's why, when I discovered I was pregnant, I was truly happy and cried with my husband. I quit my part-time job immediately and spent my days learning about childcare and what to take care of as a pregnant woman, growing the baby healthily inside me. However, those happy days did not last long. I'm coming in, okay? What? Please wait. Was the door unlocked? No. I had my son make a duplicate key. I wanted to be able to come and go freely to take care of you while you're pregnant. That day, I was feeling sick from morning sickness and was resting, when suddenly my mother-in-law entered through the front door, startling me. At first, I thought a burglar had entered, but it was actually my mother-in-law. Although relieved that it wasn't a stranger, I was shocked by her announcement that she had made a duplicate key. I didn't hear about this duplicate key being made. There's no need to report everything, right? I am family, after all. Isn't that natural? Family. Since you don't live in this house, a heads up would have been nice. My words seemed to irritate her quite a bit, and she visibly soured. But why would she make a duplicate key without my permission when it's and my husband's house? My mother-in-law, and to some extent my husband, was at fault here. Although it was too late to do anything about the key now. I thought about asking for it back, but she stubbornly refused. Does she think this house is hers? I could only sigh. From that day on, my mother-in-law started coming to our house almost every day. On my husband's days off, she often stayed over, virtually eliminating my privacy. I wish she wouldn't just do whatever she wants. And my husband should realize that this doesn't give me any peace of mind. The stress was already significant, but there was more to come. Why don't you cancel this house lease and live at your parents' house? When the baby is born, you'll be visiting your parents anyway. What? What do you mean? I mean, our cute grandson will become the heir to the family home. And he'll also take over the company my husband runs. What does she think of my child? I know that the company is doing well. And that my husband is expected to be the next president. Thinking about the future, we'll need a successor. But my mother-in-law's self-centered attitude has really angered me. It's understandable that there are differences in thinking and values due to being born in different eras. However, I couldn't suppress my anger at her comments. That seemed to disregard my child's voice. Your mother has been quite persistent lately. She comes to our house almost daily, meddling in matters like succession and education. It's driving me crazy with stress. Well, it's her way of caring, so don't say anything too harsh. It's also true that I genuinely wanted children, but I thought we needed an heir too. If my father passed it on to me, and there's no one to take over after me, that would be problematic, right? It was unexpected, but my husband shared similar views to my mother-in-law. It irritated me how they both thought of our child. My mother-in-law continued to bring kindergarten pamphlets unasked, and seemed eager to interfere in the education when a child was born. It's worrying to think about the future. Yet, the child in my belly was growing healthily, and on that day, we went to the hospital and finally learned the gender. It was a girl. Honestly, I was happy with either gender, but the thought of shopping and enjoying fashion with a daughter made me grin all the way home. I was in a better mood than usual when I returned home, where my mother-in-law was waiting. Oh, you are back. Have you found out the baby's gender yet? I heard from my son that you'd find out today. How did it go? It's a girl. But it's not confirmed yet, though it's likely so. What? A girl. You're useless. I was taken aback by the change in my mother-in-law's face and tone. Indeed, she had always talked as if the child inside me was definitively a boy, wanting an heir. I never expected such a reaction just because it was a girl. Whether it's a boy or a girl, the birth of a child is a joyous occasion. Yet, it seemed she only thought of my child as a mere tool. Useless? What do you mean? Why can't it be a girl? What? Of course, it can't be. Girls are just money pits, we don't need them. Even if you spend money raising them, they just end up marrying off, it's pointless. Producing such a money pit, you're nothing but useless. My child is my own, it's none of your business. Besides, I don't plan to rely on you for financial support. We have a succession issue in our family. An ignorant woman like you should not interfere. In today's era, it's wrong to make someone an heir just because they are the eldest son or a male. Children should have the right to choose. Things are different from the past. Why can't she understand that? I've thought about it many times before. But my anger was uncontrollable towards my mother-in-law, who only saw my child as a tool. However, unable to control her emotions, she picked up a box cutter from the table and pointed it at me. Perhaps you won't understand unless you experience some pain. Her eyes were those of a psychopath, truly terrifying. It's unthinkable that such a person was ever close to me. But since it was already late afternoon, I went into the bedroom and locked the door, waiting for my husband to return. Hi. Is it true, the child is a girl? Yes. I went to the hospital today. I thought it was going to be a boy, not just some money-draining girl. Isn't that unbelievable? Well, indeed. I also hoped for a boy. There are issues with the company. Mom is right. The amount of money spent on one child is significant, and it's just wasted money. I had hoped that my husband would be on my side. But he spectacularly betrayed those expectations. Likely, he has no sense of being a father. I was already dismayed by my mother-in-law. But they are truly alike. Trash breeds trash. But, at that moment, I made up my mind. Fine, then the useless money-draining parasite will leave. What? I don't work, I barely manage the housework. And you don't need a pregnant woman carrying a money-draining girl, right? That's why I'll leave. Fine, do whatever you want. At least you can act your part in the end. There was no attempt to stop me as I said I would leave. I fully understood their views and feelings towards our child at this point. And I had no intention of returning. Maybe I thought I'd just go back to my parents' house until I gave birth. But that wasn't the case. I packed my things and returned to my parents' house. When I told my parents about everything, they listened silently until the end. They said I could live at their house for a while after giving birth. And I decided to divorce my husband and cut ties with my mother-in-law. Then I lived a stress-free life at my parents' house. The baby in my belly growing healthily, reaching the 9th month of pregnancy in no time. New facts had emerged during that time. But I had already decided to divorce, so I didn't contact my husband at all. Then I gave birth to a healthy boy. That night, I was discharged, and the next day, as I began a happy life with the little life that had come into this world, my husband and mother-in-law unexpectedly visited my parents' house. It's been a while. Is it true that the child was born? I heard it was a boy. Wasn't it a girl? I didn't even get a call about the birth. I was really surprised when Dad told me. Why didn't you contact me? If it was a boy, we would have celebrated grandly. Initially, it was thought to be a girl, but as the pregnancy progressed, it turned out to be a boy. The only person who was genuinely happy when I told them over the phone that I was pregnant with a girl was my father-in-law, to whom I had revealed everything. I had also informed him about the birth. And my husband probably heard everything from him. But their audacity to come now, just because the gender was different, wouldn't change my feelings. It's a boy, so what? So what? Now we have an heir. Truly a cause for celebration. For now, when are you coming back? Mom said she'd support you, so pack your things and come home soon. I had informed my father-in-law that I was getting a divorce. But had he not been told? However, I have no intention of returning to these two. Wait a minute. Before that, I need you to sign some documents. Here they are. What? What is this, a divorce petition? That's right. I'm going to divorce you. What are you suddenly saying? How can someone who judges a child by gender and calls them useless be a father? I can't live with such a person. You didn't even contact me when I left. You've never fulfilled your duties as a father or a husband. So can you stop pretending to be involved only when it suits you? When I spoke clearly to my husband, he froze in surprise. I think he finally understood what he had done, but no matter how much he regrets it. The lost time won't return, and my feelings won't change. With such a husband, I wouldn't let him touch the child, let alone show him. So, will you sign this and leave quickly? If you stay here any longer, it will be a nuisance. Wait a minute, what you've been saying is all over the place. You're the one who left on your own, right? Besides, there's no way you, with no income, would get custody after a divorce. Stop talking nonsense and come back. It's the father who won't get custody. Don't you know anything about the law? Please go study properly. Indeed, I have no income. But my husband will pay child support. That's the law in the States. When I said that, the two of them fell silent. But my husband stubbornly refused to sign the divorce papers, so I closed the front door. They continued calling for me from outside the door, but I ignored everything. Two adults, really pathetic and embarrassing. When my father said that he would call the police if they continued to bother us, they reluctantly left. A week passed, and just when I thought I hadn't heard from them, my husband contacted me. Hello? What did you tell Dad? Huh? The day I returned from your parents' house. Dad said he wanted to talk about the company. He said it's about time for me to take over because of his age, so I quit my job. Then, he said he wouldn't let me take over the company, and he's divorcing Mom. He said he doesn't need someone who judges by the child's gender. You did something, didn't you? I knew my father-in-law's character well, and he had been on my side all along. But I didn't expect him to take such drastic measures against the two of them. Well, to someone with common sense, this might seem natural. That's how terrible what my mother-in-law and husband had done was. I didn't say anything special, but he said he'd help with the divorce proceedings. Of course, I'll receive child support, and from now on, neither you nor your mother will see or meet the child. Just keep that in mind. Wait a minute, there's no way that can be right. I was planning to love the child whether it was a boy or a girl. It was just a misunderstanding. Can you stop with the excuses now? It's unseemly. You definitely said it, you wanted a boy and didn't need a girl. Since you don't need one, I'm just going to divorce you, nothing more, nothing less. I said that and hung up the phone. My husband kept calling back several times, but I ignored all of them. Then he came to my parents' house again. This time with his mother. The same old story. What made them think I would forgive them after what they had done? Even if they now felt a sense of crisis and came to apologize, it wouldn't move my heart. Any further contact from them was nothing but harassment. I sighed deeply and went to the front door. Really, this is such a nuisance. Can you stop? It's different. My husband also said he wanted a divorce. I've finally understood how terrible I was to you. I'm truly sorry. From now on, I'll cherish both you and your son. Please forgive us. I'm out of work now, and I can't imagine divorcing you. Besides, we have a child. Won't you forgive us? If they were truly remorseful, I might feel like forgiving them. But it seemed to be just superficial apologies. With that in mind, I continued the conversation calmly. By the way, your husband mentioned something. He said he can do household chores himself in his old age. And he doesn't need a useless money drainer. Isn't that why he divorced you? What? And a husband who doesn't earn money, can't do household chores, and doesn't want a daughter is not someone I need. I'm not kind enough to live with someone who is completely useless. When I bluntly said this, the two of them looked down and fell silent. Why were they so downcast when I only repeated what they had said to me? If they couldn't understand the harshness of their words until they were on the receiving end, then they're foolish beyond help. I had no intention of dealing with such fools any longer, so I called my father-in-law. It seemed he gave them a serious scolding, and they finally left my parents' house. A few days later, my father-in-law contacted me to inform that my husband had filed for divorce, and that he had transferred the accumulated child support and his debts into my account. The child support payments were indeed made to last until my son turned 20, and the divorce papers were properly filed. My father-in-law had also divorced my mother-in-law, and she was apparently kicked out of the house. Although he was the president of the company, his salary wasn't high, so there wasn't much money for her to receive from the divorce settlement. From now on, my mother-in-law will have to find a job and live on her own, and no one will be there to help her. Well, my jobless ex-husband and my mother-in-law can just lick each other's wounds for all I care. As for me, I'm living happily at my parents' house with my son. What's necessary for a happy life isn't a promising son or a beautiful daughter. Just having a beloved child who came into this world and a family you can trust is enough to make life joyful. Sleeping in the middle of the day. What easygoing days you live. You useless woman. That's how my mother-in-law insults me. To her, it seems I'm just a woman being supported by my husband. She doesn't understand the struggles I've endured and the vast amount of time I've invested. Just 15 minutes. I simply lay down to take a short break and closed my eyes, which made my mother-in-law furious. I was just trying to take a little break. Don't talk back. You are just a maid here. If you're going to slack off on your housework, get out of this house. My mother-in-law doesn't listen at all. Every day, she disturbs me while I work from home and makes snide remarks. It's unreasonable to expect me to endure this lifestyle any longer. I decided to stand up and said, "Understood. With pleasure. I'll leave, just as you wish, ma'am." I spoke in a flabbergasted tone, and she was stunned, saying, "What?" Ignoring her, I quickly packed my things and prepared to leave the house. As my mother-in-law silently followed, I said, "Oh, what do you think Peter will say when he hears about this? If I tell him what you've done, he'll be furious, won't he? You sure are confident in being loved, despite being a mere maid. I'm looking forward to it." And I left the house. As expected, my husband was furious when he heard my story. The punishment he gave his mother was beyond my imagination. My name is Tracy. I am currently 28 years old, and aside from being a housewife, I work part-time as a cashier at a nearby supermarket. I work from Monday to Friday, from 8 a.m. until noon. I got to know Peter at university through the tennis club, which led to our dating. He treasures me greatly and often praises me, saying things like, "Thank you always. The meals you make are the tastiest in the world." Your outfit today is cute. I love Peter so much that about 4 years into our relationship, he proposed to me, and we got married. We've been living ordinary, happy days. About a year after our marriage, Peter suggested, "Tracy, shouldn't we start thinking about buying our own home?" Indeed, the apartment we currently live in is the same one room we moved into when we were dating. It's far from the bus stop and on the 4th floor without an elevator, which is quite exhausting just to return home. A home of our own. That sounds nice. The 4th floor is tough. And if we continue to live in this apartment, it would be too cramped to raise a child, wouldn't it? Right. It's small and the bus stop is far. Maybe it's time to move? As we talked about moving into our dream home, the conversation about what we wanted in a home expanded, like a laundry room. A spacious garden, wanting at least 2 children's rooms. And we began to finalize the ideal floor plan. Then suddenly Peter said, "You know, Tracy, actually, my mom is living alone in a big house right now. And it's too big for her to maintain, so she's thinking of selling it. Since there's no place for her to live, she wants to live with us. What do you think?" Peter lost his father to illness 2 years ago. Being an only child, his mother has been living alone. But the house his father built was too large and gradually became financially and physically challenging to maintain. So, that means the 3 of us would live together? You probably hate the idea, right? I know. It seems she's also been looking at apartments. But she hasn't found a good place yet, he said, seeing my reaction and speaking apologetically. It's not that I hate the idea. I always had a good impression of my mother-in-law as a kind and friendly person. But I was worried that living together might be exhausting and could potentially worsen our relationship. However, I couldn't just ignore her with nowhere to live. After a moment of thought, all right then. If that's the case, let's make it a 2-family house. To avoid getting on each other's nerves and accumulating stress, let's install utilities on both the 1st and 2nd floors now. Really? Thank you, Tracy. Mom will be happy too. Yeah. Although we've already decided on a floor plan, let's rethink it. With that, we apologized to the home builder and started planning a new layout that could accommodate my mother-in-law along with my husband and me. Later, my mother-in-law called. "Tracy, are you really okay with living together?" "Yes. It's fine. We've already decided. Let's live happily together, okay? However, I do want us to avoid interfering too much with each other. Like how we do housework, work methods, and so on." That's true. We would just tire each other out. Let's do that. I'm really glad to have such a kind daughter-in-law. Thank you. At that time, I thought choosing to live together was the right decision. Little did I know that I would later realize this choice was a mistake. The house was completed, and after finishing moving in, the 3 of us decided to have dinner together. At the table, my mother-in-law asked, "By the way, Tracy, what kind of job are you doing now?" "I'm currently working part-time at a nearby supermarket." "Huh? Part-time?" For a moment, her brows seemed to furrow. "I only work part-time until noon." My mother-in-law responded with a skeptical and a discontented expression. "When I was your age, I was working my fingers to the bone, barely having time to sleep. It's amazing you can afford such a lovely home without working full-time. You really married up, huh?" Her sarcastic comment was unpleasant. But I chose not to retort and instead replied lightly, "Oh, is that so? I guess I'm just lucky." I really should be grateful to Peter. Later, I learned from my husband that his mother had worked as a nurse until retirement, including many night shifts, and it must have been tough for her. Perhaps she was irritated seeing me only working part-time. I decided to avoid discussing my work in front of her. But it's true, even though it's just a part-time job, I do have some spare time. Not wanting to be looked down upon, I discussed with my husband the idea of starting to sell the handmade jewelry I've always wanted to make. Hey, I've been making earrings and necklaces for myself, but after posting them on social media, I got more positive responses than expected. I'm thinking of starting to sell them. What do you think? That sounds great. You've always wanted to showcase your creations. I'll help out in any way I can, as long as it doesn't overwhelm you. Encouraged by my husband, I began selling my handmade items alongside my part-time job and housework. Once I started selling, it turned out to be more successful than anticipated, earning good reviews from buyers and keeping me increasingly busy. One day, while working from home, my mother-in-law approached me. "Tracy, what are you spreading out all over the place?" She approached me as I was laying out various jewelry parts and design sketches. "Oh, these? I'm just making some accessories." I hesitated to mention I was selling them because I didn't want to invite criticism. People who only work part-time sure seem to have a lot of free time. If you have time for that, why don't you make some dishes instead? "Oh, yeah," I muttered as she left after dropping her snide comment. Despite our initial agreement not to interfere with each other's work and housework, I ended up having to cook not just for myself but for her as well. I thought, why on earth does she come upstairs to our living space so casually, when we specifically arranged for a two-family setup to avoid this kind of thing? My frustration grew. The next day was the same. "Hey, Tracy, you must be free, right? Make my meal too. You're slow," she called out casually. "Yes, I'll do that," I replied, beginning to prepare her meal as if it were the most natural task. I thought she could just make it herself, but I couldn't actually say that out loud. Recently, her behavior towards me had escalated, and it was starting to worry me. I intended to discuss it with my husband, but he was swamped at work and often came home late, leaving us little time to talk. Then one day, when I returned home after my part-time job, I found my mother-in-law in my room, looking at my computer without permission. "What? Why are you in my room? What's with the loud voice? It's the same house, so I can enter any room I want, can't I? That's troubling. I have personal things here. Please, don't enter my room without permission. Do you have something you don't want me to see?" "It's not like that, but..." "Like this," she said, holding up my laptop and showing me the history of my online sales. The fact that she went through my computer was chilling. I didn't intend to hide it, but please don't go through my things without permission. To think you were moonlighting. I thought you were just slacking off at home. But here you are selling these trivial accessories. You really are a carefree daughter-in-law." Trivial. I put a lot of effort into my work, and I knew you would belittle it. Which is why I didn't tell you about my side business. To talk back to me, a mere maid. What nerve you have. Maid. Is that what you think of me? Of course. What else would a wife who doesn't bring in much income be but a maid? You should be grateful, but I let you stay in my house as a maid. Her words were too harsh, leaving me speechless. How could she say such things? It was too much. But arguing with her was a waste of time when I could be finishing work for my customers who are waiting for their orders. With that in mind, I firmly said, "Please, don't ever enter my room again," and ushered her out, closing the door behind her. Orders kept coming in while I was dealing with this. I decided to focus on my work and not let her bother me. However, a certain action from her soon pushed my anger to its limits. One day, as usual, I was engrossed in making my handmade crafts. That morning, my mother-in-law had left the house saying, "I'm going out to lunch with the neighbors, so you take care of dinner. Make sure you don't slack off on the housework, maid," and, as usual, she dumped the responsibility of cooking and housekeeping on me. Understood. While I was irritated by her comments, I was relieved inside that she wouldn't be home today. I could work without feeling self-conscious. Sales have been good recently, and I've been expanding my work, even doing some drawing. It's been busy, but I really enjoy my work and find it rewarding. And my husband Peter has been supportive. I thought to myself, let's work even harder. As I was drawing, I started feeling sleepy after several nights of continuous work. I can't create good work if I keep going like this, I thought. So I decided to take a break and drank some coffee in the living room. Oh, I'm still sleepy even after the coffee, I thought as I lay down on the sofa. I don't know how much time had passed when suddenly something very hot splashed on my face, and I jumped up, screaming, "Ouch!" When I opened my eyes, there was my mother-in-law, standing with her hands on her hips. It had only been 15 minutes since I had fallen asleep. "What are you doing?" I was furious. It was no wonder, as she had splashed hot water on my face. Sleeping in the middle of the day. What easygoing days you live. You useless woman. To her, it seems I'm just a woman being supported by my husband. She doesn't understand the struggles I've endured, and the vast amount of time I've put into making my work successful. Just 15 minutes. I had simply laid down to rest my eyes, and for that, she splashed me with hot water. I was just trying to take a break. How could you splash hot water on someone's face? What if you had burned me? Don't talk back. You are just a maid here. Didn't I tell you not to slack off on your chores? If you have a complaint, then leave this house. My mother-in-law wouldn't listen at all. Every day she would interrupt my work from home and make snide remarks. It's unreasonable to expect me to endure this lifestyle any longer. I've reached my limit. Understood. With pleasure. I'll leave, just as you wish, ma'am. I spoke in a flabbergasted tone, and she was stunned, saying, "What?" Ignoring her, I went back to my room and packed the bare minimum of my belongings. As I was leaving the house, I said, "Oh, and please explain everything to Peter. If you tell him what you've done to me, I think he'll be furious, huh? You seem very confident of being loved. Just a mere maid leaving the house, and he won't care, will he?" "Oh. Is that so? I'm looking forward to it," and I left the house. That day, I looked for a place to stay and managed to secure a bed at a hotel. Then I immediately called my husband. "I've decided to leave the house." My husband was quite startled by my sudden declaration. "What? What happened? Why so suddenly?" I could tell he was panicking even over the phone. "I was napping, and your mother splashed hot water on my face. Then she kicked me out of the house. I can't live with such a person anymore. My mom did that." How terrible. Are you okay? Did you get burned? My husband asked, genuinely concerned first and foremost. I'm okay. Just a bit sore on my cheek and neck. I can't believe it. I won't forgive my mom, no matter that she's family. I'm coming to pick you up right now to talk. Where are you? My husband seemed very upset. Soon after, he came to pick me up. And after discussing it together, we decided not to return home that day, but to stay at the hotel and think things over. The next day, I've decided what to do next. Let's go home together. I'll talk to my mom. Are you sure? Yes, I'm sure. She went too far. There's no saving her now. Saying that, we decided to return home together. When we arrived, Peter got out of the car first and entered the house. Oh, good morning, Peter. You didn't come home yesterday. I was worried, my mother-in-law greeted him, oblivious to everything. As I got out of the car and was about to enter the house, she scoffed. Huh, you came back? Persistent, aren't you? Clearly displeased. Hearing her remark, Peter glared at her fiercely. Mom. So, you've been harassing Tracy and making snide comments. When I'm not around, haven't you? What are you talking about? I haven't done anything, she tried to deny it. I know everything. What did you do to Tracy yesterday? Peter exploded. What? It's her fault for slacking off as a maid and napping during the day. Right? Such a freeloader should be kicked out, shouldn't she? Maid. Tracy earns $30,000 a month. She's far more successful than I am. Peter, you didn't have to say that. What? $30,000? You must be joking. How can a woman who just makes trinkets and taps on a computer earn that much? Trinkets? That's rude. Just so you know, I've recently launched my own brand. And even received collaboration requests from famous celebrities, I bragged lightly. That's absurd. My mother-in-law collapsed, overwhelmed by the truth. Mom, Tracy has been perfectly managing both the household and her work amidst her busy schedule. And yet, this treatment. No matter that you're my mom, I can't forgive this anymore. There's a place you need to go. Saying this, he got her into the car. I also got in, and we drove to a certain destination. When we arrived, she gasped in disbelief. What? No way. It was the police station. As my mother-in-law stood there dumbfounded, he said, You splashed Tracy with boiling water, right? Her face and neck got burned, and she was told it would take a week to heal. We've got the medical report. You need to make amends. Indeed, since then, the pain in my cheek and neck hadn't subsided. And after visiting the hospital, it turned out I had sustained burns. After discussing it with Peter, we decided that this act could not go unpunished. It's too much, even for a mother-in-law. There's a risk to life if this happens again, so please stay out of our lives from now on. I'm so sorry. I never imagined it would come to this. I didn't know Tracy was working so hard at her job and at home. I'm really sorry. Please, withdraw the police report. Please. My mother-in-law was crying out and pleading. No. It's already decided. With that, he pushed her into the police station. With the medical report in hand, she was given a real sentence. She was sentenced to 1.5 years in prison. After that, we decided to sell the house we had been living in. We couldn't risk her returning to it after getting out of prison. We also bought a new home for ourselves, as we had the financial means to do so. Unlike the previous time, where we considered my mother-in-law in the home layout, this time it was a home just for us. Of course, we didn't give her the new address. Our new home quickly became our favorite place. A year and a half later, after serving her sentence, my mother-in-law called Peter once. I was out of my mind. I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted to apologize. I was disillusioned by your actions back then because I cared about you, Mom. Please don't involve yourself with us anymore. Don't say that. I want to properly apologize to Tracy. Please, let me speak to her. Peter, about to hang up, said, "What are you saying? Do you realize what you did to Tracy?" "I know. That's why I want to apologize." "Then stay away from Tracy." I stopped him. "It's okay. I'll speak to her. It's been a while." "Oh. Tracy, I'm really sorry about what happened. I didn't understand you at all and did something terrible. I really regret it now." She seemed to be deeply remorseful. "It's okay. I've heard your apology, and you've made amends. I'm really sorry." She apologized repeatedly. After her release, without a home, she apparently lived modestly in public housing on her pension. But that's irrelevant to me now. Feeling there was nothing more to discuss, I handed the phone back to Peter. Then Peter said, "Please don't involve yourself with us anymore. Good luck." And with that, he hung up. "Looks like your mother got out." "Yeah, seems like it. Aren't you going to see her?" "I'm okay now. She's your real mother, after all." "No, it's okay. We're going to be happy with our new baby, right?" He patted my belly. Yes, I was actually pregnant. 8 months along. The baby was stable, and my belly was noticeably larger. Yes. We have to protect this child no matter what. 2 months later, I gave birth safely to a beautiful baby girl. Despite the busy days filled with work, childcare, and household chores, we are living happily together with our precious little one. Failed the medical school entrance exam? You're utterly useless. But quiet. If you can't become a doctor, you're worthless. Get out. My family ruthlessly disowned me after I failed my university entrance exams. They forced me to sign a document stating never to contact them again, and kicked me out of the house. Why must I endure such treatment? I've always tried my hardest, always being compared to my excellent sister. I can't take it anymore. But a ray of hope shone for me. My life was about to change drastically, thanks to my aunt. My name is Nicole Morris, and I am 18 years old. I should be enjoying my final year of high school, but I don't have that luxury. I'm buried in studying day and night, aiming for medical school. In our family, my father is a doctor and my mother a nurse. My sister, Lucy, passed the medical school entrance exam last year. Our medical professional parents always told us, "You too will go to medical school." Lucy has always been clever and excelled academically. She was always at the top of her class and great at sports. Plus, she knew how to make our parents happy, so they adored her. Lucy would belittle me, perhaps as her way of relieving stress. She threw hurtful words at me as I struggled with my studies. "Hey, Nicole. Heard you did poorly on your mock exam again?" Lucy. It was a B. A B at this time? You're doomed. You won't pass the medical school entrance exam with that. I don't really want to pass that badly. What are you talking about? There's no point in living in this house if you can't pass medical school. If you fail, you can't stay here. With that threat, Lucy sneered disgustingly. Her expression was chillingly creepy. Living in this house. Do I really have to live the life our parents dictate? I have dreams of my own. Yes, I've always dreamed of becoming an illustrator. I love drawing, and every compliment on my artwork from others made that dream grow. I wanted to study at an art school with a design program. But being born in this family, I didn't have the right to choose that path. Even though I harbored rebellious thoughts, I couldn't voice them. Because if I did, I wouldn't be able to live in this house. My father's word was law. Just last night, I overheard my parents talking in their bedroom. Nicole will pass the medical school entrance exam, right? I'm not sure. Unlike Lucy, she's a disappointment. How can two sisters be so different? I was so sure Lucy would pass. Well, Lucy is a genius, and Nicole is average. It's unbelievable, our own child. I can hardly sleep worrying about Nicole's exams. Indeed. It'll be a shame for our family if she fails. We'll have to think about it then. How can parents say such terrible things about their daughter? It's like they've forgotten I live with them. As anger and anxiety grew within me, I still had no choice but to face the opposition and try to do what I wanted as a high school student. Finally, the day of the exam arrived. As I was preparing my entrance ticket in the morning, Lucy appeared in my room. Nicole, your life depends on today's exam, you know that, she said. I know. Don't put more pressure on me. I'm saying this for your own good, you hopeless case. I've been working hard. I don't need you to tell me that. As the exam day tension was high, Lucy's undue pressure was profoundly annoying. My raised voice attracted even our parents to my room. My father opened his mouth with a look of disdain. Hey, what are you yelling about this early? Do you understand today is the most important day of your life? But Lucy said. Are you blaming your poor performance on Lucy? No, that's not it. Let me remind you, if you fail the exam, you're out of this house. What? Shocked, I couldn't find the words. As I stood there bewildered, my mother gleefully added. What's with that what? It's obvious, isn't it? We don't need a fool who can't become a doctor. But, Mom, I can't survive if you kick me out now. You're 18, right? You're an adult now, so it'll be fine. If you fail, just get a job and do your best. That's. I was constantly berated by my family until I left the house. Incompetent, disappointment, no chance of passing, they said. And my mental state was nearing its limit. Even at the examination venue, my nervousness didn't subside. And my mental state during the exam was terrible. Surprisingly, I felt no confidence in my answers. 2 weeks later, on the day the results were announced, I accessed the university's website at exactly 10 a.m. Due to many people accessing at once, it was hard to connect to the results page. Please, show me the results quickly. I don't care if it's a fail, I just want to escape this pressure. As my family impatiently asked, isn't it ready yet, the website finally loaded. After comparing my exam number, I couldn't find it. No matter how many times I checked, my number wasn't there. As my parents sighed deeply, Lucy's laughter echoed through the room. Silent, I couldn't utter a word as my father slowly spoke. Nicole, how much more do you intend to embarrass me? Dad. A doctor and a nurse's daughter failing medical school. Utterly useless. But quiet. If you can't become a doctor, you're worthless. Get out. My father's face was like a demon's, his cheeks flushed with excitement. I sought help from my mother, but she wouldn't even meet my eyes. That's when my sister, Lucy, delivered the final blow. You're just trash, aren't you? Lucy. But I've really been trying hard. I protested. Excuses don't matter. You failed to get into medical school, and that's all there is to it. Just failing means you have no place in this house. That's people like you, who are useless. I'd rather you leave before you embarrass me and our parents, okay? Bombarded with heartless words from my own family, I felt more numbness than sadness. I couldn't even cry anymore. All I could do was feel the reality of being abandoned by my family. The next day, my father thrust a pledge at me. It stated, "Never involve yourself with this family again." Without allowing me to speak, my parents demanded that I sign. Of course, I couldn't refuse, and I signed the pledge. Why did it come to this? I had tried so desperately. But no matter how hard I tried, without a medical school acceptance, it meant nothing. My parents only wanted me to become a doctor. My sister, who easily met our parents' expectations, was loved, and I was disowned just like that. A week later, I was thrown out of the house. Dragging a carry-on suitcase with no destination, my phone rang. It was my Aunt Jenny, my father's sister. As soon as I answered, I heard her cheerful voice. "Long time no see, Nicole. How did the exams go?" Aunt Jenny. "I didn't pass the medical school entrance exam." Medical school? Weren't you always interested in drawing, Nicole? Yes. But my parents forced me to try for medical school. And since I failed, they kicked me out of the house. What? Kicked out? So where are you now? I'm on my way to the station. I have nowhere to go. After hearing my situation, Jenny paused before saying, "Why don't you come stay with me?" Really? Can I? Of course. We don't have kids, and it would be lovely to have you here. Aunt Jenny. Thank you. So I started staying at my aunt's house from that day. Although I hadn't decided on a path forward, having a destination made my steps lighter. I explained everything to Jenny and her husband upon arriving at their house. After listening, they suggested that I attend a vocational school. Nicole, you love drawing, right? Isn't that what you wanted to pursue? Yes, I've always wanted to be an illustrator, but I know. You never really had a choice, did you? But now you're free to do as you like. We'll provide the money. Aunt Jenny. You don't have to live by what your parents dictate. You should pursue what you want with all your heart. Grateful for my aunt's generosity, I decided to go to vocational school. Finally, I felt a step closer to my dream. Years later, my dream of becoming an illustrator came true. And I began working freelance. I started with small paid requests on social media. And eventually, companies began approaching me. Recently, I've been tasked with character design for a smartphone game. And my name has become more recognized. My illustrated books have been well received, and my income has steadily increased. One day, about 7 years later, I received a call from my father. It wasn't a pleasant feeling, but I couldn't ignore it. Hello? Nicole? You're working now, aren't you? What's with the sudden call? So what if I am? I need money. Pay back the money. Pay back. I don't remember borrowing any money from you. It's the child support I spent on raising you until you were 18. I'll let you off with $200,000. Prepare it within a month. Got it. Before I could respond, my father hung up abruptly. Confused, I told Aunt Jenny about the situation, and she said, "Don't worry about it." Still, I wondered why my father suddenly demanded money. He's a doctor, he shouldn't be struggling financially. Why all of a sudden? Could there be some reason he needs money from me? So, I searched online for information about my father's hospital. The moment I saw what was happening, a vengeful spirit awakened within me. I see, that's what's going on. Then I'll make sure to give them a taste of their own medicine. Determined for revenge, I decided to visit my parents' home over the weekend. Seeing me for the first time in years, my parents immediately started shouting. "Hey Nicole, you brought the money, right? We're letting you off with $200,000. You're paying it all at once, right?" To that, I confronted them. "What are you talking about? First of all, why should I pay $200,000? What? It's the money it cost to raise you. Yes. We provided you with a carefree home for 18 years, so listen to your parents. Provided for me. Parents are supposed to support their children, it's their duty." My words made my parents' faces turn red, and they began to tremble. I relentlessly continued. "And after all the comparisons to my sister and the terrible treatment, you think I felt like I had a carefree home? Don't be ridiculous. We paid for your tutoring and gave you a good life. That's right. Everything would have been fine if you had just passed the medical school entrance exam. What does that have to do with your hospital going out of business?" At that, my parents' expressions froze. As if they couldn't believe I knew, they looked utterly shocked. "Dad, what's with that face? It's hilarious. Hey, Nicole, how do you know about the hospital? If you suddenly say, 'Return the money,' of course, I'd think something was off. So, I looked up your hospital online. Then I saw it had closed down and I couldn't help but laugh." "No. That couldn't be helped," my father protested. "Couldn't be helped? But there were so many bad reviews, right? The doctor's attitude is terrible, quack doctor. The director and his wife look down on patients. Why would you know all that?" I knew the hospital management was deteriorating even before I left home. It was inevitable. A hospital run by people who always look down on others and think academic credentials are everything was bound to fail. That attitude continued, the number of patients rapidly decreased. And a few months ago, the hospital finally closed. Apparently, to keep the hospital running, my parents had incurred a lot of debt. When they could no longer manage, they turned to me for help. There was another problem in this house, my sister Lucy. I threw a sarcastic remark at my father, loud enough for my sister to hear. "The sister you had such high hopes for is now a splendid shut-in, right? Really, sorry for you." "Why, how could you know that?" "Because sister, you're using your real name on social media. You used to post all sorts of nasty things about me. Now it's just a nerdy account, right?" A nerdy account. Posts like I dropped out of college, my crush in the smartphone game. Alex is the strongest, this month I'll borrow more money to spend on Alex. You just tweet stupid things like that, right? And all under your real name. It seems that even after Lucy dropped out of university, my parents continued to pamper her. As a result, she became a hopeless shut-in. borrowing money to spend on smartphone games. Then, Lucy, with fire in her eyes, came up to me and grabbed my collar, raising her voice. Hey! Did you just say I only tweet stupid things? It's the truth, isn't it? Got a problem with that? I have every problem with that. I'm dedicating my life to Alex. You wouldn't understand, would you? I do understand. I'm Alex's parent, after all. Parent? What are you talking about? Alex is a character in a smartphone game. He doesn't have parents. That's what I mean. I'm Alex's creator. What? Yes, the moment I saw my sister's social media account. I burst out laughing because the character she's currently obsessed with is one that I designed. To think that the sister who used to mock me so much is now pouring several thousands of dollars into a character I created. Just thinking about it made me feel victorious. Upon learning everything, my sister collapsed to her knees, turning pale, and muttered, "I've been spending money on this girl's drawings. Sorry about your luck, sister." Ignoring my sister, my parents changed their tune. They grabbed my hands, their voices dripping with ingratiation. Amazing, Nicole. We had no idea you had such talent. Nicole was always the better child. We never expected such a filial ending. Filial? Come back to this house and support us, Nicole. I'm so happy we can live with Nicole again. Please start paying off our debts, even little by little. Do they still think I'm some kind of robot who does everything they say? I have no intention of obeying my parents anymore. I coldly dropped the truth on my joyful parents. What are you talking about? There's no way I'd help you after all the abuse and kicking me out of the house. How dare you say such things so lightly? Wait, please. It's not like that, Nicole. That's right. We've always cared about you. Don't mess with me. You just want to use me for money now that I'm successful. I'm not going to be controlled by such trashy parents anymore. The hospital closure and the way sister turned out, it's all your own doing. Suffer for all I care. Go to hell, all of you. I ignored my staggering parents and forcefully shut the front door. Later, I heard from my aunt that my parents had declared bankruptcy. They had sold the house and all their possessions. But it wasn't enough to cover their debts, and bankruptcy was the only option left. Until the end, they were looking for me, but thanks to my aunt hiding me, they couldn't find my whereabouts. I can't thank my aunt enough. Everything I have now is thanks to her. Aunt Jenny, thank you so much. It's fine. I'm really happy that Nicole can work doing what she loves. I'm grateful to you, Aunt. Thank you for taking me in back then. Hee, thanks to Nicole, I'm happy too. My aunt and I smiled at each other. Maybe I'll get married if I meet the right person in the future. Until then, I want to repay my aunt as much as I can. My sister is beautiful and talented, while I am completely ordinary. We were never treated equally by our parents. Escaping from parents who offered no love seemed only natural. Yet, 10 years later, those same parents reappeared before me. Disheveled, screaming, "Why didn't you tell us? My name is Kristen. I'm a 16-year-old high school student from an ordinary family. My father is an office worker and my mother a homemaker. It seems like a case of a hawk being born from a buzzard because Abby, my younger sister by 2 years, is stunningly beautiful. Likely a throwback to a very beautiful ancestor on our mother's side. Her beauty is my parents' pride. Moreover, Abby is very intelligent. At 14, she's already settled from being called a prodigy at a younger age. Yet her academic performance remains outstanding, always topping her middle school classes. This, of course, only elevates our parents' pride. However, recently their favoritism toward Abby has intensified. It started to show when she began middle school, but now it's worse than ever. While it's fine for parents to dote on their daughter, the disparity between how they treat me and another daughter is too great. Abby is so adorable that we bought her branded clothes, my mother would say cheerfully. But when she turns to look at me, her smile vanishes instantly. Do you want new clothes because you've grown taller? Don't joke around, we're not a wealthy family. If it's just a bit of growth, you can adjust the hem and wear it. I absolutely won't buy clothes for you. Fix them yourself, she would say. When my clothes finally wear out beyond repair, I might get new ones, but only from a thrift store focusing on cheapness. The difference in how we are treated doesn't stop there. My parents take Abby out with them, while I'm left to house sit. The same goes for vacations. I'm always told, you stay home and do the chores. Even Abby tries to include me by saying, what about sister? But my mother just smiles and tells her, no. Kristen needs to study because she doesn't perform as well in school. My father also said, that's right. Abby isn't just beautiful, she's also kind. To worry about her failed sister like that, and laughed at his misguided joke. I was allowed to attend high school, but of course, it had to be a public one. My uniform was a hand-me-down from someone my parents knew. And all my school supplies and bag were second-hand bargains. While school life is enjoyable, I can't afford to hang out with friends after school because I don't get any allowance and can't work part-time. I have house chores to do. As parents dote on Abby entering high school, they told me, we let you go to school in exchange for doing the chores. That means I handle all the housework. My homemaker mother does nothing while I shop with limited money, clean, and cook after school. She just watches TV and laughs, telling me to be quiet if I try to speak to her. After dinner, I'm ordered to stay in my room as if they wish to be a happy family of 3, excluding me. What kind of happy family is this? Am I not a part of the family? Mostly ignored and barely spoken to, I'm treated more like a maid. It seems there's no place for me in this house anymore. Perhaps there's no point in staying. It would have been better if I could have claimed abuse. But while there's no physical violence, I'm provided with the basics of food, clothing, and shelter, so how much understanding could I expect? Talking about it would likely only make things worse. So, must I just endure? There's a term junior caregiver. But how many kids are forced to care for perfectly healthy and able parents? As I wash dishes in cold water in the middle of winter, being told not to use hot water, tears well up in my eyes. Yet, as a child, I still hope for my parents' affection. After finishing the housework and returning to my room, I study late into the night, pushing myself to do better. Unlike Abby, who grasps things quickly, I need more time to understand. Thus, I spend all my available time studying, hoping that good grades would make my parents happy, and they would finally see me, not just Abby. But such hopes shattered with the first test of my sophomore year. I did it, holding the paper with my rank on the first term exams of my sophomore year. I trembled. I'm first. Our high school isn't low level, quite the contrary. Many graduates go on to top universities. Being first in such a school is a significant achievement. This will make Dad and Mom recognize me. Overjoyed, I showed my mother the results when I got home. "Mom, look. I got first place in the exams." "But..." "What?" "It doesn't matter, go clean and do the laundry." "What?" "It doesn't matter." Those words dashed my elated spirits as if doused with cold water. "But Mom, you always said, get first place then you can be like Abby. You'll be treated like her." She interrupted before I could finish. "I don't care about that. Do you think you and your ugly self are the same as cute Abby?" "What?" "It doesn't matter what your grades are, in the face of Abby's beauty, they're irrelevant. First, there's beauty, and because Abby has good grades on top of that. She's our perfect daughter. But I'm also your daughter." Tears welled up in my eyes, but my mother wouldn't look at them, wouldn't even try. "No matter how hard you try, you'll never measure up to Abby. Be thankful you can attend school, live in a house, and have food to eat. Now go do the chores without slacking off." At that moment, it felt as though the ground beneath me crumbled. What? Why do I have to be treated like this? If I'm ugly, then it's because of you too. That night, when my father came home, it got even worse. "What? First place? So what?" he said, tearing up the paper with my grades. Oh, how ugly, the futile struggle of an ugly daughter. "You know, we don't even want to spend a penny on you. You should be thankful we're even doing that much. Doing the house chores is your role." "It's terrible, Dad." "What's so terrible?" My despair deepened as my father added insult to injury. "What value do you even have? If you want us to acknowledge you as a daughter, then start making money now. If not, at least do the household chores properly. And once you graduate from high school, get a job and hand over your entire salary to us." "What?" Stunned and wide-eyed, I couldn't comprehend what was being said to me. But my father just grinned slyly. "I'm telling you to support us properly. Make sure you take care of us until the very end, okay? Maybe, just before I pass away, I might acknowledge you as a daughter." Saying this, my father headed towards the bath. And I could hear my mother laughing behind him. At that moment, I understood everything. It was hopeless. These parents. They were beyond saving. There was no value in staying with them. "Understood," I said simply, then secretly slipped out and made a call from a public phone to my maternal grandparents. After that, I went back to my room, packed my bags, and prepared to leave. Thanks for, well, actually, you never did help. Goodbye. I had only really received care when I was a baby. As I grew up, my parents never saw me, never treated me as their daughter. In the end, I was just a maid to them. What reason was there to stay attached to this house? My grandparents must have had an idea. Without asking for details, they immediately told me to come over. I thought about speaking to Abby before I left, but decided against it. She wasn't aware of everything that was happening, and she would be shocked once I was gone. But it would be sad for her if she got into trouble with our parents because of me. It was better for her to continue being adored as she had been. At least I wanted her to live happily. So, I left the house without saying a word. Laughter from the TV and our parents filled the living room as I left. I left home and walked away without looking back. No one was there to see me off. The grandparents I hadn't seen in years were surprised, but welcomed me with smiles. Apparently, there had been some falling out with my mother, leading almost to estrangement, which is why we never visited my grandparents' house. When I explained my situation, they were shocked and even offered to call my parents to talk it over. But I refused. There was no room for discussion anymore. There could be no reconciliation with that house. I couldn't forgive them anymore. Understanding my resolve, my grandparents welcomed me in. The days that followed were full of surprises for me. "You don't need to do the housework, I'm still young enough to handle it," my grandmother would say, taking over the chores. I only helped occasionally. A student's duty is to study, but enjoying your youth is also important, my grandfather would say as he gave me some allowance, which allowed me to hang out with friends after school or during holidays. I came home to a warm bath and delicious dinner. Normal days, normal yet not so normal days. Ordinary yet filled with happiness. Above all, my grandparents saw me. They would pat my head and praise me. "Kristen is also our very cute granddaughter," they would say with a smile. Their love was what made me happiest and motivated me. Previously, I had worked hard hoping to be acknowledged by my parents and to prove something to them, but now it was different. I was working hard for my grandparents, for the people I wanted to repay. This effort bore fruit, and I went on to college, and then landed a job in a fairly large company, leading a smooth-sailing life. Before I knew it, I was 26, 10 years since I had left my parents' house. Living independently from my grandmother's house, I was busy with work. The days at my parents' house felt like a distant past, almost fading from memory. But then something happened that reminded me of those times. One day, I received a call from my grandmother that shocked me. "Huh, Mom and Dad are there?" Apparently, my parents had suddenly shown up at my grandparents' house. Despite not worrying about me or contacting me in the 10 years since I left. "They're demanding that Kristen come out, what should we do?" "Understood, I'll be right there." I didn't know what they intended by showing up now. But I didn't want them to trouble my grandparents. I asked my boss for permission to leave early and hurried to my grandparents' house. "I'm home." As I entered the house and saw the figures sprawled on the living room sofa, I couldn't help but yell, "What are you doing here?" I wanted to remain calm, but I couldn't help but feel my blood boil. Yet, as I was about to lose my cool, my mother stood up and confronted me screaming, "Kristen, why didn't you tell us?" That shockingly shifted me back to calmness. Because my parents had changed too much. Mom, what happened to you?" In just 10 years, my mother, who should have been in her early 50s, had hair completely white and was heavily wrinkled. My father seemed to have lost much of his hair. They looked older than my grandparents. Surprised, my father yelled, "It's your fault." My fault? How could it be my fault when we haven't seen each other for 10 years? Once, I would have shrunk under my parents' scolding and apologized immediately. They probably expected the same reaction. But instead of cowering, I glared back, and for a moment, they flinched. "Ah, you're still as unappealing as ever." "Thanks. I'd be nauseous if you thought I was cute." That took them by surprise. Their eyes widened in astonishment. In that funny moment of shock, my mother snapped back to reality and accused me. "You're acting all high and mighty. But it's your fault our lives are ruined. Take responsibility." "What are you talking about?" "They claim to be living in poverty now." "Why?" "What happened to Dad's company?" "It went under last year because of the recession." "Oh, that's unfortunate. You're in a decent company, aren't you? Support us with your salary." "No, thank you. That's right, support US, huh? What did you say? Perhaps they thought I would comply as usual. When I repeated no, thank you, my father had to ask again. Oh, you. Have you forgotten the debt of being raised by us? My mother attacked, but I retorted. A debt of being raised? I was the one doing all the housework. It feels more like I raised you. With that, even my mother was left speechless, her eyes bulging in disbelief. You're both still in your 50s, right? You can work. Work at this point. Thinking you can live comfortably after unemployment? That's naive. What? My strong words made my father flinch. What about Abby? What happened to the beautiful, talented daughter you adored? Yeah, that's right, that. What now? Do you know where Abby is? What? She ran away from us. That's when I understood everything. Huh, so your precious daughter dumped you? I sneered, and then my mother came at me again. Why didn't you tell us? Asking the same thing again. Tell you what? That Abby was only outstanding because of you. What are you talking about? Don't play dumb. She told us that her being outstanding was thanks to her big sister. When she failed her exams and we blamed her, she said it was because the sister who used to help her wasn't there anymore. So, she finally told the truth. And you devils who drove her big sister away, you glare at us, huh? Then the conversation stopped, and just when she finally got a job and was about to start bringing money home, she disappeared days ago. She even quit her job, and we have no idea where she is. That's right. Abby's beauty might be thanks to our ancestors, but her academic success was a different story. Though my parents and I didn't get along, my relationship with my sister wasn't bad. In fact, it was quite good. We didn't show it much in front of our awful parents, but at night, she often came to my room. We talked about all sorts of trivial things, and I tutored her in her studies. I wasn't quick to catch on, so I had to study hard to understand things, which made me good at teaching. Thanks to me, Abby's grades were always at the top. But everything changed when I left home. Not only could I no longer tutor her, but the shock of my departure made her grades plummet. She barely made it into a decent high school. I heard she managed to get a job, but I asked about something that bothered me. What did you do with Abby's salary when she got a job? We took all of it, of course. All the money we'd poured into that girl was for that purpose. My mother replied as if it were the most natural thing. I couldn't even sigh, I was so appalled. If she couldn't make it into a top company, at least she could have gone into show business and made some money. But she totally rejected that idea. Such a waste of her beauty. Well, who would want to enter an industry knowing they'd be exploited by their parents? What did you say? My words made my mother glare at me, so I glared right back. She faltered instantly. How weak. Why was I ever afraid of someone like this? I had been brainwashed, after all. And I was just a child. But I'm not afraid anymore. Saying that, I stepped closer to my mother. Now it was my turn. How does it feel to be abandoned by your children? What are you? You knew, didn't you? That you never really loved us. Not me and not even Abby. She ran away because she knew. What are you saying? Think about it. Have you ever told your daughter you loved her? Treating her like she's just a cute toy or a pet, who would feel real love from that? I shouted with a fierce look, and my parents were speechless. Is pampering all you think love is? oppressing the older sister, and adoring the younger. Who would think such a situation is normal? Only someone as abnormal as you. Don't force your twisted views on us. We are individuals, thinking and living our own lives, not tools for your convenience. Pressed by my intensity, my mother fell over, and my father plopped down too. No money because you're unemployed? Sell the house, it'll fetch some money. That's already been seized for our debts. Serve you right. I couldn't help but laugh out loud. So now you're living in a shabby apartment? Yes, that's right. But that's about to end too, now that you'll support us. Just as my mother was about to say that I should parasite off me since Abby was no good, I was about to shout back when enough. My grandfather, who had been silent until then, shouted, "How selfish can you be? Children are not tools for their parents. I did not raise you to be this way." He glared at my mother, who recoiled. "What, Dad, you were always so harsh on me. You went down the wrong path despite that." Yes, I failed in raising you. But children can grow up without parents. I'm proud to see such a fine granddaughter grown from such a parent as you. My failure is redeemed by her. You don't even deserve to be in this house. No way. Even my father's anger left my mother without words, and she fell back. I crouched down to their pale faces. Never show up in front of me again. If you do, be prepared next time. Prepared, what do you mean? Remember what you did to me, and expect payback. What? My parents had once been such terrifying figures. But now they were completely fallen, devoid of any dignity. It's hard to believe I was ever afraid of such insignificant people. If you come again, I'll call the police, so be prepared. With my final words, my parents, pale-faced, rushed out of my grandparents' house. What happened to them afterwards, I don't know. Rumors say they got into trouble because of debts they shouldn't have taken on. But whatever that trouble was, it's probably best left unthought of. I have no intention of delving into the dark world I don't know. Nor do I have any sympathy for my parents. After hearing about their fate, I made a phone call to a certain person. "Hello, big sis? Hey Abby, how's it going?" "Yeah. You sound good too, sis." The voice on the other end of the phone was my sister's. There was an odd pause in the conversation, given that she was overseas. "How's everything there? Are you managing okay?" "Yeah, I've settled in completely. Thanks for helping me out, sis." "What, anything for my cute little sister?" "Yes, my sister is now living abroad. I had known for a long time that our father's company had gone bankrupt. Because she told me. After moving in with my grandparents, I had reconnected with her. Occasionally, she came to my grandparents' house, and I helped her with her studies. Thanks to that, even though her grades had once dropped, she managed to get through college and even landed a job. Our parents didn't know about this. When our father's company went under, I told her to escape from our parents. We were children once and couldn't have survived on our own. I couldn't ask our elderly grandparents to take care of another person. So, my sister just managed to stay out of harm's way at home until she found a job. But she had been planning her escape all along. My father's unemployment was a good opportunity, I think. She had always known that our parents' love was never genuine. Fed up with parents who only cared about their own appearances, she took my advice. She quit the job she had taken just as a stopgap and went overseas to pursue the job she truly wanted. I helped her with the arrangements without letting our parents know, and provided some financial support. Everything was done secretly, under the radar. My sister, who had been parasitized under the guise of parental doting, had finally gained her freedom. When I told her about our parents' current situation, she just said "I see," without any emotional fluctuation. That's what payback for false love looks like. Thanks, big sis. Come visit me sometime. Yeah, one day. The sister who used to cry about how hard it was at home is no more. The sister who lamented the phony affection is now embracing happiness. I love you, big sis. With words of genuine, familial love, I replied with a smile, I love you too.